Good morning. This is the City of Oklahoma City's agenda for City Council meeting of June 7th, 2022. For most of you that are sitting here a little bit wet, the mayor is caught up in some bad weather and traffic issues, and we're going to go in and get this started, and he should be here shortly. I'd first like to start with the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. The invocation today is coming from Jonathan Meyer, pastor, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Pastor, we're so glad to have you here today.
I'm glad to be here.
Please stand.
There aren't a lot of Lutherans in Oklahoma, so I'm glad to be one of them and to be here with you today. I know that there are not everyone in our state is Christian, but if that is your faith, I invite you to pray with me. We pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty and triune God, you have given us this good land as our heritage. So grant that we remember your generosity and constantly do your will. Bless our community with honest industry, truthful education, and an honorable way of life. Save us from violence, from discord and confusion, from pride and arrogance, and from every evil course of action. Father in heaven, from you comes all rule and authority in order to curb evil and to uphold those who do good. So give those to whom we have entrusted the authority of government the spirit of wisdom, that there may be justice and peace in our land, and that they may serve you faithfully in our generation. Graciously regard your servants on this council who make and administer the laws and policies of this city. Enlighten and defend them, and guide them by your Spirit, that they may be high in purpose, wise in counsel, firm in good resolution, unwavering in duty, and that under their peaceable governance your people may be guarded and directed in righteousness, quietness, and unity. Merciful Lord, from whom come all holy desires, all good counsels, and all just works, give to the citizens of Oklahoma City that peace which the world cannot give, that our hearts may be set to obey your commandments, to love you with our whole hearts, to love one another in your church, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And also that we, being defended from the fear of our enemies, may live in peace and quietness. When times are prosperous, may our hearts be thankful, and in troubled times, do not let our trust in you fail. Lord, I pray, especially for the cities, big and small, which have experienced violence and pain through mass shootings, that justice would win the day, that hope would arise in the hearts of those impacted, and that peace would reign among all. O triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, hear my prayer. Hear the cries of our hearts, the groans too deep for words. Deliver and preserve us, forgive us where we fail, and lead us as a community united in actions reflective of your loving kindness toward all people, a love that surpasses politics, a love that reveals itself most fully in the humility of the cross. Grant this through Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, who lives and reigns with the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Next, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Today, we're honored to have Olivia West Cahill here today. She's representing Girl Scouts Troop 633. Thank you for being here, Olivia.
Hi. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good job, Olivia. Thank you. We now find ourselves at item number 3 from the office of the mayor. And, I need to call the meeting to order. I forgot again. The meeting is now called to order. We'll go to Roman numeral number 3 from the office of the mayor. We have an appointment of Mary Blankenship Pointer to serve as a member of the Pioneer Library System Board of Trustees. I'll entertain a motion at this time for that appointment. We have a motion and a second. And since I don't have the mayor's password, I'm going to be voting by voice, but please cast your vote at this time. Aye. The appointment passes. Next, we'll go to Roman numeral number 4, which is items from council. This is a resolution approving city business related to travel expenses for council members Jo Beth Hammond and Nikki Nice. I'll entertain a motion at this time. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your vote. I vote yes. The resolution passes. Next, we will have the city manager's reports. I think today we just have claim and payrolls.
That's it. That's all we have.
That's pretty simple.
Yes.
All right, item number 6, Journal of Council Proceedings. This is to receive the journal and approve a journal, and I think we can take that with one motion. Yes. Passes. All right, next we have request for uncontested continuances. City manager?
Yes. So first we have one that's listed on item 7 there as item 11K, and that will be deferred to the June 21st meeting. And then on page 11, we have item 11B, item 9BV. 9BV. We're going to strike this item so that we can bring it back. We need to make a few changes, and we'll bring it back on the next agenda. And then on page 12, item 9CG, we're going to strike this item. We weren't able to go to the MAPS Advisory Board before coming to this. The MAPS Advisory Board did not have quorum, and so they didn't meet. So we just need to strike that so we can take it to MAPS Advisory Board first. And then on item 9CH is the same situation. We're going to strike that so we can take that item to the MAPS Advisory Board first.
Okay.
Then to page 16, item 11S1. All of these items will be stricken from the agenda. Item B, 3005 Hickory Stick Road to re-notify for additional structure. Item D, 925 Tabor Drive because the owner is secured. Item E, 7401 South Walker Avenue, the owner is secured. Item K, 3235 Southwest 29th Street, the owner is secured. Item L, 4533 Southwest 29th Street, this property is now occupied. Item M, 2216 Northwest 34th Street, the owner is secured. Item O, 2816 Southeast 46th Street, the owner has secured. On page 17, item 11T1, abandoned buildings. Item C, all of these items are stricken from the agenda. Item C, 925 Tabor Drive, the owner is secured. Item D, 7401 South Walker Avenue, the owner is secured. Item I, 3235 Southwest 29th Street, the owner is secured. Item J, 4533 Southwest 29th Street is occupied now. Item K, 808 Northwest 38th Street, the owner is secured. And item L, 2816 Southeast 46th Street, the owner is secured. And that's all the items I have.
And the first one again was 11K?
Yes, 11K.
Thank you. Sorry. We now find ourselves at item 8, which is revocable permits and events. The first A is a revocable permit in the Boathouse District. I'll turn that over to Ward 6 at this time.
I believe this is actually in Ward 7. I think there was a clerical error.
Yeah, as far as Boathouse
about that.
District is, yeah, okay. We just wanted to make sure, we weren't sure with redistricting, what got redistricted out. Please.
Good morning, Council. I'm Tegan Malone. I'm from Riversport, and we have before you the revocable permit for Stars and Stripes, which is a regatta we have held for numerous years. It is a one-day event that will begin early in the morning. We have rowing events, dragon boat events, canoe and kayak events, and the evening will conclude with fireworks, like we've done just about every single year. Have food trucks and have a nice big festival atmosphere. Welcome people from all over the metro and all over the state into Riversport to see everything that we've been working so hard to make sure that we've got nice for the city.
Well, I will say, if you have not seen the fireworks from the river area, it is an amazing view. So looking forward to this event, and I will move for approval.
We got a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Tegan, thanks for coming today. I vote yes. It passes. The next revocable right-of-way use permit is for Juneteenth on the east on June 18th, 2022 at Northeast 23rd Street, Ward 7, please.
Yes, I believe we have someone to speak on that.
Would you please state your name for the record and your home address?
Yep, my name is J.B. Williams, and my address is 2320 Northeast 26th Street. I'm one of the organizers for Juneteenth on the East. This will be our second year. Last year we had about 3,000 people come to Northeast 23rd Street for the festival, and we're looking to do that, maybe more this year. It was a great time. We have concerts, we have a mural expo, we have dance classes for students. We have a kids stage with the OKC Thunder Bus, and then the Boys and Girls Club bus as well, doing education. We have a 5K run, car show, and just a great time for our community and for people to gather and just be together for Juneteenth and celebrate the liberation of our people. So,
Okay.
All right, looking forward to this event. First time on 23rd Street in a long time last year, so we'll be celebrating again in the same spot. So with that, I'll move for approval.
We have a motion. May we have a second, please? Please cast your votes. Yes. It passes. We'll now recess the council meeting and convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. We have items A through, Craig, through O.
Yes, can we vote on N separately?
Okay.
On N,
All right.
I'm sorry, may we, I think I spoke with staff, I'd actually like to go into executive session to learn a little bit more about that item, please.
Okay.
And then I'm sure still we'll continue with the vote separately. Thank you.
Now. All right. James, are you making a motion at this time?
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And is there a second? Please cast your votes to go into executive session. Yes.
N.
It passes. So at this time, for you in the audience, we are going to go into an executive session and we'll return shortly.
Okay, we are back from executive session. My gratitude to the Vice Mayor for helping us out. I've never taken an hour to get to City Hall before, so my gratitude, I'm sure, to our first responders who are probably pretty busy this morning. Okay, so we are on OCMFA, and we were just in executive session on item M, right?
Yes, and there's a request to.
Yeah, to vote on this, or N, I'm sorry, item N.
Request to vote it separately.
Okay, so is there a motion to approve item N, and then we'll take the rest of the docket. All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 5-3, and then we have the rest of the OCMFA docket. Do we have a motion on that? Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, we'll adjourn OCMFA and convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority, where we have items A through C we could take with one motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. There we go. No worries. Passes unanimously. All right, we will adjourn OCPPA and reconvene as, I'm sorry, is that right? We just did PPA? Okay. And reconvene as the council meeting, where we find ourselves on page 4 of your printed agenda, item 9, the consent docket. And the only presentation we had scheduled just got struck, so we have no scheduled presentations. Is there any item on the consent docket that a council member wishes to pull out for a separate vote or separate comment or discussion? Hearing none.
Sorry. I spoke with council staff about this. I think particularly since it's the budget hearing, it might be helpful for, in fact, they saw it coming. It might be helpful under item AI and AJ to hear how much we've approved, we being the voters and I guess council, when it comes to street resurfacing and how much more we have left to spend. I think our residents might want to hear that.
Okay.
Please.
AI and AJ.
Please, thank you. And then just kind of a brief update and some comments on item AO, please.
Okay.
I believe that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Item AU.
Okay. All right. Well, if that is it, we'll take them in order, which means we'll start at AI.
Honestly, it's just, I think the work you all have undertaken at Public Works with our streets is literally historic. And I think since the budget's on the docket today, it might be helpful for residents to hear what what the total amount we have dedicated to street resurfacing. Maybe even the difference between the residential and arterial, just for those who might not know, and how much more we have left to expend, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to assist. Eric Winger, Public Works Director. As we look at the street improvement program that's been underway for several years as part of our Better Street, Safer City initiative, it included both the sales tax and the 2017 bond. Both were initiatives passed by the voters of Oklahoma City. We are actually winding down the sales tax initiative. All the sales taxes have been collected, and that work regarding street resurfacing is coming to a close. We will have expended in excess of $168 million on street resurfacing and the sales tax. The bond is where we're really focused going forward. And so to date, as we talk about the 2017 bond and as we talk about the next two items, I and J, on the residential side, there are actually 23 projects in the bond program. The total is $139 million that's included in the bond. 54.6 have been sold to date. There's about 84 million remaining that we'll be selling in the next several years. So at this point, we're about 39–40% complete with the bond residential. Now, bond also includes arterial streets, and we have 156 locations identified as arterial resurfacings. There's 155 million total in the bond program for arterial resurfacing. 60.3 million has been sold to date. There's about 94 million remaining to be sold, and we're also about 40% complete with the arterial in the bond program. So it's going to be still very aggressive. Over the next several years, we resurface approximately 100 miles of roadway a year in Oklahoma City with the Better Streets program, and that can be what is expected in the years to come as we finish that program.
Thank you for walking us through that. And again, thank you and your crew for their work, and especially during COVID, because I know that COVID it really affected our public works employees quite a bit. And so I just really appreciate you. Thank you.
AI, AJ, and AO? Not AO. Okay. You're gonna stay here and go to AO, Councilman Cooper?
Yes, Mayor. Go ahead. Crown Heights Park, Sidewalks. Tell us all about it, where we're at. I am thrilled about this project.
So item AO is an actual final acceptance of sidewalks that have been constructed at Crown Heights Park. This added some walkability, additional walkability to the park. It also included some solar lighting in some areas as well. I hope to have had the total mileage of sidewalks that we were able to construct at the park. I wasn't able to get that by this morning, but I'm happy to share that. But again, enhancements to the park for users, patrons, and residents of the area are now complete and ready for use.
I, again, really want to congratulate you and your workers on this project, because I have a Ward 2 resident who lives just up the road outside of Crown Heights, but they go on walks in Crown Heights now because of those sidewalks. And so it's not just the Crown Heights residents, though I definitely see them using them, but it's the neighborhoods around there too. And so I think there's like some connections that are gonna probably happen as the maps for sidewalks come into play as well. So I just wanted to congratulate you all on that work. I have very much enjoyed those sidewalks in Crown Heights, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Nice, AU?
Yes, I know there were some questions asked from one of our residents about Deep Fork as far as the drainage in the basin. So I just wanted some clarification for you to speak to that. And before you do that, I do want to say, yesterday I was at the corner of Northeast 50th and Prospect, and I don't know when those stop signs got there, but they look great. Thank you.
You're welcome. If I update on item AU, this is a consultant review committee report and an authorization to negotiate. We're seeking today with an engineer that will complete a citywide drainage master plan. So this is our ability to get started with citywide drainage basin studies. The city's made up of 5 major basins. They include Deer Creek, Deep Fork, North Canadian, and the Little River. Now, those are the major basins, so there's a lot of sub-basins that are within the city, and we receive concerns and complaints from a lot of those sub-basins. That can include creeks like Lightning Creek, Mustang Creek, and others. Those are included in these larger basins, but all 5 major basins will be studied as a part of the master plan. There's going to be some prioritization to where we can actually focus on the most difficult areas first. The report is expected to be complete by the end of the year, so we will have some more information here in the next few short months. But what will happen next is we'll negotiate the contract with the consultant, Hewlett-Zollars. Following the council's recommendation and approval this morning, we'll bring that contract back to the council before they actually get ready and actually start.
I guess I'm curious, I just don't know all the kind of jargon or kind of vocabulary related to this. Can you talk about how these basins affect like a neighborhood street flooding or downtown flooding? Like how does this all work together to try to help ease some of the potential flooding and just make drainage a lot more readily available?
Right. You know, one of the things that's a real challenge for staff and as we manage Oklahoma City is just the vast size of the city itself. At over 621 square miles, I mean, we just encompass a large area. So having 5 drainage basins is a lot. You can picture these basins as giant bathtubs, if you will. They each have a drain, but we have to look at them independently, so they're not connected. So the water that falls in one basin stays inside that basin and goes to one outfall or one source where it empties all of its water. The consultant's going to assist us in looking at those individual basins instead of everything at once. But again, each basin's going to have its priorities. So as we get priorities for Deer Creek, as we get priorities for Deep Fork, as we get priorities for the Canadian, North Canadian, and also the Little River, we're going to be able to then focus our resources with either bond funds, drainage utility funds, other funds that might come available to then address those drainage projects. We do see that there's going to be additional study that's necessary. So what we would likely see is that some of the problematic areas, perhaps like in Northeast Oklahoma City, where we get a lot of complaints around Deep Fork, this is going to help identify those specific areas of Deep Fork that need study and then improvements. But the basin's much larger than Deep Fork. It'll study all the creeks in the Deep Fork area. So same thing for Southwest Oklahoma City. We do get a lot of complaints for the Mustang Creek area in Southwest. Same thing, we'll do the studies, complete prioritization, and then again, hopefully begin project planning and going forward. Ultimately, we'll have a long list of projects for consideration by the council for the next bond issue and seek funding for those improvements.
So after we receive this as far as the consultant review committee report, when will we expect to, is there a timeline? Maybe that's the question I should ask.
So our timeline to do the master plan, we're going to negotiate the contract as quickly as possible. We'd like to get that back to the council within about a month. So as soon as we're able to find a fee that is acceptable to both the city and the consultant, we'll bring that back to approval. We will get them started immediately with the studies, and we hope to have that first report by the end of this calendar year.
Are we starting in a specific area, or are we going to start where we've had the most complaints?
So they're going to actually receive all of the information that the city has collected for years. It will include complaints, but it'll also include surveys. It'll include any of our FEMA mapping information. It'll include our flood studies. That's what they're going to use to make those prioritizations. So we know that we are not resourced to be able to do every single project in the city at once, and so we'll put them in a priority order of greatest impact to least impact and focus on the greatest need first.
And some of this also will help set the stage for information to help us when we start preparing for the next bond program as well.
Correct.
On that note, I know this is just a favorite topic of mine. I'd be curious, I know the voters in Fort Worth just approved a bond recently, and it included some drainage investments. I'd like to know, I have two questions. One, I think you might be able to answer now, Director Winger, but the bigger one I think might require some research. One, I know I don't mean to demean the fact that $65 million is what we set aside for the previous bond. I just know that the need is greater. It's somewhere between 500 million and $1 billion. So then that kind of seems like a drop in the bucket. So my question for you first, and then it'll be a bigger question, is that 65 million, what has it looked like historically for our city when it comes to investing in drainage infrastructure improvements? What kind of totals do we tend to do when it comes to the bonds?
I'm going to have to look that up,
Ooh,
what the
please.
previous bond issues had focused on. Bond issues, just like the 2017 that's focused predominantly on streets because of the citizen survey, There have been previous bond issues that had a heavy focus on drainage as well. Oklahoma City has been plagued with some flooding conditions that have been addressed in certain parts of the city. We're aware of some new drainage needs, and this study is going to help bring those to light even more so. So I can get that information for you.
It'd be super helpful. I know there were those 5 attempts in the 80s to try and pass bonds and sales tax improvements, and they didn't. But I'm just kind of curious when they did, what those look like. And then the bigger question, and the reason why I referenced Fort Worth, I'd love to know what maybe some of our peer cities have done, what their drainage packages end up looking like. And I know going into the next bond that street resurfacing will probably once more be the priority, as it should be, right? It's just that I really would like to learn from these other cities what they're expending on drainage. And I'd like to have maybe, Craig, City Manager Freeman, you come from finance. I'm wondering what finance and budget might have to say to us in terms of lessons learned from the 2017 general obligation bond and pairing that with the 27-month MAPS 3 sales tax extension. And I think the question I really have then ultimately is how might we maximize in this next go-round what we did back then? What are the tools at our disposal this time? And not just from what we learned in our own experience, which A, is historic, and B, very helpful, but B, if we can learn from peer cities what they've kind of done to address this, it would be very helpful if we can bring that back to council so we can kind of start figuring out what our different funding sources are. And even some stuff we haven't done previously. That's why I'm interested in what other cities have done as well. And I also know that Tulsa had some pretty historic like flooding years ago, and now they're like internationally known for being one of the most sustainable cities in the country. So I don't know, I want to prioritize drainage improvements is ultimately what I say, at kind of the same level that I would talk about housing and street resurfacing. And so I'm just really interested in that, and I just thank you all for this work.
Thank you. And we actually have two residents who've signed up to speak on this item. John Pettis.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. John Pettis, 1208 Northeast 55th Street, Oklahoma City, 405-641-7566. I just have a couple of questions regarding this study of the Deep Fork Creek, which will be included in the study. Will the tributaries leading into the Deep Fork River be addressed and become part of the study?
So the studies will include all of the areas to see what needs to be addressed. So until we actually get the results from the consultant, it's difficult to know today, but the goal of the study is to identify all the problematic areas in Oklahoma City so that we can begin developing projects, including the Deep Fork area.
Okay, the reason for my asking that is that a lot of the water runoff for the city streets, because of development that has occurred over the years, have gone into the drainage channel, and those drainage channels are going through people's backyards, and then it eventually gets down to the Deep Fork River. And I'll speak concerning the Wildwood Cashin addition. There are several homes where the water has come across their backyard over a period of time that I know one home on Lottie, I'll take Lottie Street. I know one home, when you walk out their backyard, there's a 50-foot drop all along those houses along Lottie. The city has said, yes, there's a problem, but it's on private property, and we can't come out and address that. And my question is that, will this study address that, and will the consultant visit with the property owners who are being affected by the drainage property through their neighborhood?
So the goal of the study is to identify all the areas, so yes, to include the Deep Fork. We have a lot of history with a lot of the concerns and complaints from the Wildwood residents that we're going to be sharing with the consultant, so they're going to receive all of that information. But this first part that the council is considering today is the master planning process. So it's difficult for me to stand here today and say what all the very specific recommendations are going to be, but this gets that process started with the master planning for all that information to be received and reviewed and recommendations made back to the council.
Mr. Pettis, we're just almost right at 3 minutes. Is it possible you and Eric could have a dialogue outside after the meeting, or maybe get some of your questions answered?
Sure, we can go out there now.
Yeah, maybe that'd be best. Thank you. George Edwards also signed up on this item.
Mr. Mayor, council members, I'm George Edwards. I live at 5909 North Kelly Avenue. My number is 405-850-1630. My family has owned the property from Lincoln to Kelly, 50th to I-44 since 1930. I've lived on the Deep Fork River for 71 years. I have followed that. And over the years, we've had more and more development, which has increased the flow. In 1966, ODOT came to my father and said, we're turning Northeast Expressway into I-44. We're going to have to shut your driveway. And then they compensated him to build a bridge across Deep Fork River at 5909, which was done. Over time, we've had increased flooding. We had major flooding, and in 2013, I had an engineer inspect my bridge. He condemned it because the scouring of the Deep Fork River from a sewer pipeline of Oklahoma City's created vortexes. It took out all of the riprap, the concrete apron underneath it, all of the soil, and exposed the girders, and my bridge was condemned. It is still ongoing. It was repaired. We've had additional problems in the last year. Every time we have a flood, I video it off my bridge. And I have seen 10 feet horizontally and about 30 feet vertically go in one flood. Now, this has been an ongoing problem. I addressed ODOT before or while they were starting the construction of 235 and asked him, what about your stormwater retention ponds? Oh, we didn't do any of those because the price was too expensive for the land. So again, we have an 8-foot diameter pipe to dump that flood water off 235 into Deep Fork. By taking this land from erosion, it's called adverse condemnation, taking it without payment.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
What?
I don't think he knows about that.
I didn't hear what you said.
There's a 3-minute limit, and you have 30 seconds left.
All right. So it's imperative that a major study be done and correction made. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll just say in closing of that, as you hear, these are the concerns of the community for Deep Fork Grill. Deep Fork Grill. I think I need some breakfast. The Deep Fork River. So if you can help me make sure we prioritize those asks that we just heard, that would be most helpful as far as this process is concerned for the next steps. Thank you very much.
All right, that's all the items that we had residents sign up for or that a council member asked to pull out, so we could take the consent docket now, if there's a motion. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 10 is the concurrence docket. We have items A through K we could take with one motion. A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item 11, items requiring separate votes. Item A is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 14624 Southeast 104th, going from AA to RA. This has been deferred a variety of times. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we defer this to August 16th.
Okay. Got a motion to defer to August 16th. I assume that is you have investigated and that is a council date?
I'm hoping so. Somebody told me that was a good day.
Sound about
so.
right? Okay. Motion and a second. Cast your votes to defer to August 16th. Passes unanimously. All right, 11B is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1424 Northwest 33rd, going from R1 to R2. Councilman Cooper, no one has signed up to speak.
Yes, and with that, I would move for approval.
A motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item C is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 1224 Southwest 29th, going from R1 to C3. Did Councilwoman Young happen to mention this to anyone? Or?
Has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they have not.
On her behalf, I'll move for approval.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item D is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1925 Eminence Way from PUD 153 to R1. Councilman Carter.
Has anyone signed up to speak?
They have not.
I move for approval.
All right, got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item E, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 7601 South Shields Boulevard, going from I-1 to I-2. Councilman Stone, no one has signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an item that, this is for a RV sales and service facility over on South Shields. It was recommended for approval from the Planning Commission. So with that, I will move for its approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item F, ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 12610 North Mustang Road, going from RA to PUD 1846. And Councilman Carter, the applicant is available for questions.
Well, I don't really have any questions, but just, want to make sure that the TEs are followed and the things that we've discussed are already put in place. So if we can do that, then I'll move for approval.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item G is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 15027 North MacArthur, going from R201 and C3 to PUD 1882. Councilman Stone Cipher, nobody has signed up to speak.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you said, this is an ordinance on final hearing. The applicant is First Liberty Bank. The purpose is to permit a mixed office and commercial development. It was approved on April 14th by the Planning Commission. I'm aware of no protest, and there being none, I'd move for its approval.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mark Zitzow with Johnson & Associates, 1 East Sheridan Avenue. Our client is in
You're representing
talks.
the applicant?
Yes. Our client is in talks with a potential seller, so we'd like to ask for a 2-week continuance on this, just to make sure the application reflects everything the seller or the buyer would need.
I'll move to continue it for 2 weeks, please.
Okay. All right, so we need a motion to defer this item to the meeting 2 weeks from today, the 21st of June. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item is deferred. Okay, item H. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 13300 Southeast 74th, going from AA to PUD 1888. Councilman Stone.
Thank you, Mayor. Has anyone signed up to speak?
They have not.
This one is a challenge for sure. I've met with some of the residents out in the area and continue to work with Mr. Winger on making sure that some of those challenges are able to be overcome. But with that, I would like to go ahead and move for its approval.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item I is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 9211 Southeast 44th, going from R1 to PUD 1889. Councilman Stone. Oh, and we did have the applicant, Kelly Work, is signed up, or representing the applicant.
I think we're good on that.
Oh, that's a J, I'm sorry, never mind.
What?
No one's here for I.
All right then. Well, it was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. Certainly fitting in the area, so with that, I'll move for its approval.
Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item J. This is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 4020 and 4021 North McKinley, going from R1 to SPUD 1217. Councilman Cooper, for this item, Kelly Work, representing the applicant, has signed up to speak.
And in fact, I would love to invite him to do just that, please. There's a lot of history with this project, like a tome worth of history. And so if you wouldn't mind walking us through how we got here and the work that you've done with residents to get us to this place, that'd be very helpful, Mr. Work.
Okay, thank you, Councilperson Cooper, and thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Kelly Work, and my address is 105 North Hudson, Suite 304. And as Councilperson Cooper mentioned, this has a little bit of an unusual history because it did take quite a long time to get through the Planning Commission. There were multiple continuances, and that was mainly because there was some litigation that was pending to resolve some title issues that related to the vacation of the right-of-way there in this piece of property between Northwest 39th Street and Northwest 40th Street along McKinley. And those issues were all resolved, and the title issues were settled. The project itself is really not controversial. It's a single-family detached residential infill project. There are two tracks, one on the west side of McKinley. There's an existing, relatively new home that was built in, I believe, 2019 that is on that westernmost tract. And then on the east side, there will be three new single-family homes constructed. And as Councilperson Cooper mentioned, there was a lot of engagement with neighbors back in 2020, and there was a fair amount of protest from them. And those issues have all been resolved. To my knowledge, we have an agreement with neighbors that are to the west that is in a written agreement. We also have an agreement with the neighbors, a written agreement with the neighbors to the east at front on 40th Street. And so I think everyone is satisfied with the issues that have been raised. And we did have a hearing in front of the Planning Commission on April 14th. The Planning Commission recommended it for approval unanimously. There was no protest at that meeting. There was a gentleman that was present who had a question about the location of the storm sewer, and I think we successfully addressed his concern. We're aware there's a sanitary sewer that runs east and west just to the south of this project, and then there's a storm sewer that runs along the east side of McKinley. We're very much aware of the location of those existing facilities, and we will be, of course, staying away from them in connection with our construction. That was the concern that one gentleman had at the Planning Commission. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I'm not aware of any protest at this time, and we would request your approval.
Thanks for that, Kelly. Would you mind also just speaking briefly about the property to the east there of this one and what kind of compromises you all were able to work out a little bit?
The property to the east, you said?
Yes, please.
Yes. the homeowners to the east that are the first house that front on 40th Street, immediately east of our property, they had access that was being taken from their backyard to the west. And so with this proposed development, they were going to be losing that access. And they had a pretty large pecan tree that was blocking their entrance to their backyard from the north. So we reached an agreement with them. We will be we'll remove their existing chain link fence. We'll be replacing that with a 6-foot wood fence. We're going to provide them with 2 gates, including a gate on the north side of their property, and we'll be providing them with a gate on the south side of their property as well. And then we agreed with them. There was another pecan tree kind of at the northeast of our property, right on the corner, and so we reached agreement with them. So the pecan trees have been removed. They now will have access to their property from the north, and then once this project is built, they'll also have a new gate from the south of their property. So with that, all that was reduced to writing in a written agreement that they've signed and we've signed, and so I think all that has been resolved.
I am impressed that, especially the way you worked with them, the residents right there to the east, because when they reached out to our office, I could just sense it was like a sadness. It was kind of palpable. They had just gotten so used to that access there and then that tree. And so I just really appreciate you and your folk just taking time to work through this. And the only reason why I wanted you to walk us through it in public is just, I just think that transparent process is always really important to bring to the conversation. So I really appreciate you walking us through the history. And with that, I would move for approval.
Thank you, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, item K was previously deferred to our next meeting, which brings us to item L. This is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval. At 2215 North Classen Boulevard, going from R2, Gatewood Urban Conservation and Classen Boulevard Overlay to SPUD 1389. Councilwoman Hammond, no one has signed up to speak.
I think I did see that the applicant was here. If they could come up and just speak to what this rezoning will do, just so we have it on the record.
Hi, folks. Alex Klingelhafer, 3348 Northwest 172nd Terrace, Edmond 73012. Phone number 410-703-9434. This is just to allow this building, which is right now zoned R2, to be leased out. Currently under the current zoning code, it used to be a nail shop. It's not allowed to be leased out for commercial purposes. This SPUD will allow that building to be leased out for commercial purposes. Also includes provisions to come back to the city if the land is to be redeveloped in the future. Happy to take any questions.
Awesome, thank you. I know I just had some residents that live behind the building that had received the notice and kind of had some questions, so I just wanted to make sure that we were clear about what the process was and that it really was just to allow it to be used for more things than just the one use. So I will move for approval.
I've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thanks, folks.
Okay, item M is an ordinance on final hearing recommended for approval at 4020 South Walker Avenue, going from R1 to SPUD 1395. Councilman Stone, no one has signed up to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is to permit a mixed office warehouse development on South Walker. It's recommended for approval by the Planning Commission, so I will move it for approval.
All right, I've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, item N, ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 13790 North I-35 Service Road, going from CHC to SPUD 1399. Councilwoman Nice Noen has signed up to speak.
Thank you. I will have Mr. Box come up, and some of the questions that I had, he can answer now, and I did get some explanation on that. And I know one of the things that we were talking about is the billboard as far as it remaining with the new development. So if you can explain that and what the purpose of this is.
Sure. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. So the purpose of this rezoning is to allow some expanded commercial development to occur here. Specifically, my client owns a pest control company, and it's zoned right now CHC, and the use necessary for that is not permitted in CHC, so we made application for the SPUD. There is the one TE that we asked to be deleted. The Planning Commission agreed to that, and the reason being is my client owns the property, but there is an existing Lamar billboard that you can see on the survey. The billboard has been there for many decades. My client has no legal rights to the billboard. The billboard exists through a perpetual easement, so my client doesn't have the legal right to speak to the billboard, and so that is what we explained to the Planning Commission. And with that explanation, they agreed to delete that TE to allow my client to be able to develop the property and that long existing billboard to remain.
Thank you for that explanation. So with that, I will go ahead and move for approval.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, item O is an ordinance on final hearing that was recommended for approval at 1035 Northwest 112th Street, going from R1 to SPUD 1400. Councilwoman Nice, no one has signed up to speak.
Thank you. And the purpose of this is for office warehouse development, and I understand it was approved by our Planning Commission, so I will also move for approval today.
I've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, this brings us to item P. P1 is a public hearing regarding the fiscal year 2023 annual budget, and we have one person who's signed up to speak under that public hearing, Nicole McAfee.
Hello, my name is Nicole McAfee. My pronouns are they and she, and I live at 1712 Northland Avenue. I have a few questions for you to reflect on while I provide my comments. When you ran for elected office, did you know that your role in the municipal budget was to be a rubber stamp with no room for meaningful input? Did you intend to have no say, not to represent the people of your district, and how hundreds of millions of dollars are spent annually? Did you expect your constituents to have no say? Because that's the reality of the situation. A February seminar and presentations that share already drafted budgets you're expected to greenlight in a single vote without any room for redistribution, prioritization, or addressing our community needs is not a democratic budget process. It fails at even being the illusion of such. The vote before you today is big. The status quo wants to make it feel overwhelmingly bad to express your dissent, to question the process, so they've lumped this together in a single vote, creating a false urgency based on the fiscal year timeline. I'm telling you, it's a budget that doesn't represent what's best for me and my communities, and I don't think it's what's best for the city at large. And you'll find plenty of people who agree with that sentiment, a lot more that can find the capacity to be here at 8:30 a.m. for an unknown number of hours on a Tuesday in June. A $1.8 billion budget, that's an amount of money that most of us can't fathom having at our disposal. It's an amount of money that could ensure we live in a city where everyone is able to meet their basic needs, where we can have meaningful conversations about the practice of shifting away from punitive responses towards options that center safety. $1.8 billion is on the line, and you're just going to sign off on it being spent like this? The budget before you fails to account for money set aside in last year's budget that was supposed to go to mental health-centered pilot programs that better serve community needs. It doesn't address our disproportionately deadly police force, It does not account for the way we're seeing an increasing number of our community members unable to meet their basic needs, including shelter and food. And it certainly doesn't address any of the standards of transparency, accessibility, or community engagement that should be part of a democratic budget process. So I'm asking you to vote no, to demand that the budget be a community-involved document that actually reflects the needs and values of the folks who live here.
Thank you. Item P2 is a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023 annual budget. And Mr. City Manager, I understand you have maybe a short presentation?
Yes. So Doug's just going to do a recap on the budget from the information that we provided before.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Doug Dowler, Assistant Finance Director and Budget Director, and today you have before you the proposed fiscal year 23 budget for your consideration. Before I go over the figures in the budget, I want to talk briefly about the process that got us to this point. The budget was introduced on May 3rd. We had presentations from police and fire that day. That day was when we opened up the various channels for residents to make comments on the budget. We had subsequent meetings with presentations by another 7 departments on May 17th and May 31st. A summary of all the comments received on the budget was presented at the May 31st council meeting, and the comment period was extended, and today, or last night, we emailed out the comments that have been received to date, as well as you have a copy of those at your place there. And while there have been opportunities for residents to speak at each of the meetings when departments made their presentations, today we held the formal public hearing that's required by state law when you vote on adoption of the budget. As we look at the overall proposed budget, it totals $1,836.1 million. That's an increase of about 8.4%, primarily due to increases in the MAPS 4 program, which increased by $131.6 million. The general fund is up 11.4% over the current year budget to $557.1 million. And this high level of growth is really attributable to the extraordinary sales tax growth we've seen in the current year, not necessarily growth that we're expecting for next year. For the upcoming year, we are looking at an increase of 123 positions to just under 5,000 authorized positions. That's an increase of about 2.5%. While this is the largest total of city employees for the city, some context may be appropriate. If we look back 10 years to the FY14 budget, the number of positions in the coming year is up 9%, and during the same time frame, our population is up over 13%. So growth in city employees has lagged growth in the city population. While nearly every department saw additions in staffing, the largest changes occurred in 8 departments that I've shown here on the slide. Some of the notable changes include the addition of 18 firefighters to help to reduce the need for overtime in the fire department, the addition of a 7-person crew in general services to help serve as a fire station renovation team, the addition of an 8-person civilian accident investigation unit and 5 911 dispatcher positions in police, the creation of a 5-person unit in public transportation and parking to handle parking enforcement duties, and then contracting out utility cut repairs in public works, which reduced 29 positions. But as Eric Winger, Director of Public Works, noted in his presentation, all of those employees are still working in public works as there were numerous vacancies there that they were able to slide into, and there should be no reduction in service as the contractor begins to take over those operations. Utilities added 12 positions in their customer service division. So again, an addition of 123 positions throughout the city. As we take a look at some of the budget numbers, we'll start with our revenues. The largest recurring source is taxes. They total $780 million, or 43% of our total budget. Sales tax is the largest source in the category at over $543 million of the total. Another area of note is fund balance, our second largest revenue source, with MAPS 4, MAPS 3, and Better Street, Safer City accounting for more than half of that. When we turn to the operating portion of the budget, revenue totals $838.3 million. The operating budget strips away our capital and non-operating funds like MAPS 4 and Better Street, Safer City. This gives you a better perspective on the resources available to provide services to our residents. Again, taxes are the largest revenue source in the operating budget, totaling $525 million, or 63% of the total, and fund balance becomes a much smaller portion at just 3%. When looking specifically at the general fund, the distribution is somewhat similar to the operating budget, with taxes making up 72% of the total, sales tax accounting for 53% at $296 million. Use tax becomes a bigger portion of the general funds, projected at 17%. so sales and use tax account for more than 2/3 of our general fund budget. On the expenditure side of the budget, we look at the overall total first. Personal services is the largest category at 32%, followed by capital at 24%. Right behind that, other services, which includes contracts, utilities, and chargebacks. Capital outlay is the third largest category at 23%. When you narrow into the operating budget, the amount going towards personal services becomes the majority at about 2/3 of the total. As we exclude most capital expenditures and move into operations, people become the primary expense. And as we focus in further on the general fund, personal services continues to be the vast majority of the expenses at 69%. Other services at 23% include things like utilities, contracts for service, and our payments to COTPA. And supplies, capital, and transfers are all fairly small at 8%. So taking a look at the general fund by service area lets you see in broad terms where we spend general fund dollars. Public safety makes up the majority at 62%, and you can see the other categories between 9 and 18%. So I want to thank my staff in OMB as well as the people in each of the departments who've worked on this budget that is before you for consideration. I believe we've done a good job balancing all of the competing needs in each department, and I'm pleased to present the proposed budget for your consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate Doug's leadership and the team in preparing the budget. I just note too that there's several areas where we're still trying, working to try to address responses related to CARES funds that we had used, like in transit, we had CARES funds that were supporting some of this budget to help us through the time with COVID. We're getting to the place we're getting most of that restored, and so I really appreciate the effort to make sure that we can cover that. We had a lot of growth in revenues over this past year. It's allowed us to be able to add some services in many different areas, and I really appreciate the work of all the departments. I mean, every single department's involved, those that are involved in providing the services and making the recommendations of what we bring forward to you in the budget.
Thanks, Doug. Thank you. All right, well, any comments or questions? If not, we've obviously gone through this for several weeks now, so if there aren't any, we can.
Mayor, may I just
ahead.
ask Doug just a general question? In terms of the projection for sales and use tax increase for the upcoming year, what's just a rough percentage?
With May and June coming in stronger than we expected, we had projected 0% growth for next year. But because we did a little better than we expected here at the end of the year, we're actually at a -2% is our projection for sales tax for next year. So the possibility of a recession is certainly on the horizon, and I think we've got a reasonable budget to account for that. On use tax, I think we're at about 6%. As our projection for next year, which again is down. We had originally started at 10%, which has been our history at 10+% the last number of years.
Right.
So again, because of the good results we've had at the end of this year, it's moderated that projection next year to 6% for use tax.
Well, thank you. I think that's a conservative approach, really.
Yes.
Yesterday after the market closed, Target announced that has some inventory problems in terms of not being able to sell certain goods, which is an early signal for a recession if the second largest retailer in America has inventory problems. Offsetting that, though, it looks like we're well on our way to an inflation rate of over 10%, and as it goes up, our sales tax revenue should go up as well, in addition to our expenses. But I think a conservative approach of a reduction by 2% overall.
And what we've seen these last couple of months is we have seen growth in sales tax, but it hasn't been as high as the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
So I do think that's impacting people's bottom line. They have less to spend on those things that they're taxable.
Well, I think so, and what we've seen historically, we are still greatly impacted by the oil and gas industry. With higher prices for oil and gas, that's helpful. It provides a buffer to our community should we enter into a recession nationally. So overall, I think you've taken all those factors in and have a good plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to echo David's comments, and the one thing I think he makes a good point on is when you see Oklahoma oil and gas, oil over $100 a barrel, and gas at almost $8 an MCF, that may play into how we are affected differently than on a national scope. And so the one thing I'd like to do, if at all possible, City Manager, is have Russell Evans come and speak to us at another meeting pretty soon so we can get his thoughts and opinions to give us some guidance.
Okay, we get his mid-year report coming up
Usually
fairly
around
soon,
August.
right? And so
Usually around
usually
August.
sometime around August, we'll have him come back after he's completed a mid-year report, and so we'll make sure that we get that scheduled.
I sure would appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thanks, Doug.
I have a few questions, and then I'll have some comments. Questions. One is, now that we have this process in place, and I want to thank Councilman Stonecipher for working with me to create that 20-day public comment period, and also want to thank Ward 2 resident Elizabeth Sidler for bringing it to our attention, because that's kind of expanded the process. But my first question is, going forward, because it's so new, this 20-day comment period, first question, what can we as the city manager's office do to respond to these different suggestions or inquiries that are in here? Do you, like, in other words, not necessarily like funding what the thing that they said, but being able to respond to say, okay, well, here's why we do it this way, or here's why this is, or actually, yeah, that's a good idea, we should move that way. So I think that might be the next kind of missing part here, is like the dialogue. For a dialogue to happen, right, someone has to have a back and forth. And in this instance, it's the comment from the public to us, but then it might feel like it just goes into the void.
No, I get that. I think last year, you know, we didn't know how many we'd get. We had, I think, somewhere just short of 100 comments that we got last year. So some of it becomes staff time to devote to that back and forth. This year would have been a lot simpler. We had 5 comments actually prior to the deadline period, and then another 10 came in. So it's something that we can explore to see what we could do. If there's Doug and I were talking about it this morning, of if there's some way that we could at least engage them, to let them know that this has been, you know, we've received this information.
Yep.
So it's really going to be a matter of limitation with staff time of what we can do to engage in that. And the main issue was making sure we could get the comments and provide the feedback to the council so you know what comments are there as you're contemplating the decisions you're making.
Okay. So yeah, as you all work through that, it would be very helpful to then kind of come back to us and let us know like what those responses are. Like, because there's some questions here that people ask that I'd like to know the answers to as well. So that's the first question. My second question is, when we have the budget workshop in February's, I think, and maybe it's just me as an English teacher, I have a bit of a issue with the use of the word workshop, because it doesn't feel like we're not really workshopping. We're not like going through the different departments and kind of you know, offering ideas and moving this around or doing any of that. It's much more a presentation to us about where we're heading. So I'm curious, and I don't have the answer for this, but I am curious what could happen going forward in those February moments where we really take advantage of what like a workshop could be, in terms of that, again, dialogue between council members and the city manager's office and department staff. And I think equally important is the role of the public earlier, like for them somewhere in that February workshop moment where the public has more access to what the city manager's department office and the different departments are thinking that early as we head into that May. I don't have that answer, but it seems like that could be a missing component here, is a moment for the public to really hear a bit more what is coming from you all's minds in the city manager's office, and again, what the departments are thinking. And I think if it's that early, then I think it might, I'm just guessing aloud here, it might give us more public feedback. So if you could kind of help us think through that ahead of next year's budget, I think that would be very helpful, city manager. And then I'd also like to learn, this is my third item, a little bit more. There's this concept called a participatory budget. I'd like to learn more about if any of our other peer cities do that, and what the pros and cons are of such an approach. My understanding is a participatory budget is where residents actually, again, get to kind of participate a little bit more and gain a bit more of an awareness of how the budget works. And now look, everybody, I say this as a former middle school teacher, and you all went to K through 12. They don't teach us how our city government works in K through 12. So I think as adults, it might be helpful for us as a public body and then as residents to actually better all understand this process together. It's a government of the people. So just would like to learn more about that. I'm not saying I'm in for it or against it. I just want to learn more. Any feedback on that before I turn to one more thing? Cool, thanks. And then I just wanted to invite Director Fairbrush from Embark to speak briefly about some of the ridership numbers that we've experienced because of investments we made in last year's budget. And that's going to help me explain to some of my Ward 2 residents why what my thoughts are on this year's budget. So.
Yes. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jason Fairbrush, Public Transportation and Parking Director.
Thank you. And this is just a similar to earlier in the day when I asked Public Works to kind of speak on the street resurfacing, whether arterial or residential, because there might have been a lot of people who didn't tune in to the Public Works budget presentation, and there might be people as well who didn't get a chance to tune in to your presentation from Embark. So my first question is, last year we had a route where it was our final route, and I believe that went from 1 hour frequency to 30 minutes. And would you remind us the story of that route, with the route number, where it serves, what happened once we increased the frequency in last year's budget, please?
Sure, yeah, happy to speak about that particular route. So in last year's budget, council allocated some additional funding for us to put an additional bus out on Route 18. So the significance of putting an additional bus on the route means we're able to improve the frequency. And, you know, going back to our original Nelson Nygaard study back around the 2013-2014 period, we've relied on that study to incrementally improve our transit system with obviously the support and funding of council over the last several years. And so two things were significant. Once we were able to increase the frequency on Route 18, and then it was a milestone for us as a transit provider and I think as a city, in that that was kind of the final route that we had been working to get all of our routes on 30-minute frequency, right? So kind of a milestone from that perspective. So with that additional frequency, we have seen some pretty significant ridership increases, but at the same time, we have additional trip generators on Route 18 that are supporting some of that ridership. For those of you, I know council is very familiar with many of our bus routes, but Route 18 primarily serves Lincoln Boulevard. And so we now know that on Lincoln we have a couple of grocery destinations in the Homeland and the market at East Point. We know we have the Employment Securities Exchange Commission there, and other trip generators that have sprung up, if you will, along that route. And obviously looking forward to the Senior Wellness Center that will be open soon. We want to make sure we had some of that transportation out there. So just an example of, I think, really great timing and allocation of resources, increasing that frequency at the same time where we have trip generators. We've seen through May, these are just our May numbers, a 79% increase in ridership, and that includes also adding bus service on the weekends, which we previously did not have. So again, I think it just goes back to the fact that we had a plan in place and we continued to have confidence in that plan and work that plan.
Thank you for walking us back through that service. And again, because there's generally a counter argument people will make. They'll say, why are the buses empty? Defund public transit. And it turns out just what you heard right there, it's the opposite. When you invest in public transportation, the service improves, people use the service, 79% increase ridership connecting people to their basic needs. Thank you, Embark.
Well, I think too, the other component of that, of course, we always talk about ridership, and then the other side of that, in my mind, is always the economic development and opportunities for businesses to thrive along those routes too. And so we can look to various transit modes, routes. The streetcar is a good example of increased property values along the routes. We're optimistic that we're going to see hopefully a lot of the same positive effects of the BRT going along Northwest Expressway and Classen. So I couldn't agree more in the fact that the ridership is certainly a plus, but then also just we always like to talk about transit also as an economic development tool.
Yeah, that transit-oriented development. Thank you so much for reminding us of that. And not only does that development occur along the route, but you're connecting people to jobs and education. Education gets them the skills to get the good paying careers, right? You mentioned BRT, and that gets us to this year's budget. My understanding is that 20% of the region's jobs are located along the bus rapid transit route of Classen and Northwest Expressway. Is that correct?
Yes, yep.
So again, 20% of the region's jobs. 40,000 residents live along this route within a half mile, is that correct? Thought so. And then 91,000 jobs. Okay. That's really the only. Embark will be with this budget. Would you tell us what comes with BRT in this budget, please?
Yeah, sure. So the budget as proposed and with approval of council will add $2 million to the public transportation and parking budget. That will facilitate really the startup expenses, if you will, of the BRT, adding 27 additional positions primarily with those funds. And, again, thinking if some didn't hear the budget presentation, we're planning on service in the fall of 23, but we know we have a lot of hiring, we have a lot of training, we have a lot of non-revenue service type activities to prepare for as we stand up that new service. So we'll actually be hiring and training primarily bus operators the last half of this fiscal year in preparation to be ready for that service in the fall of 23. Thus the need for the additional funding this year in anticipation of the BRT the following fiscal year.
And then we have about $2 million additional that'll have to be added to next year's budget to ensure we have full service funding.
Yes.
It'll be an annual $4 million.
Roughly.
Yeah, roughly about $4.5 million is what we're looking at for this initial BRT. That's operations needs, that's maintenance needs, that's pulling in an additional trainer, an HR professional for recruiting. So all of that combined.
And again, for those following along and might be hearing this for the first time about bus rapid transit, though I doubt it is the first time, this route will go where 20% of the region's jobs are. 40,000 residents live along this route within a half mile, 91,000 jobs. Not 30-minute frequency, but what will the frequency be? What will people, in other words, when will the next bus rapid transit show up at the next station?
During peak frequency, we're targeting every 12 minutes.
Right. So every 12 minutes, and that's an industry standard, am I right? 15 minutes or less?
It fluctuates, but ideally, yes, 15 minutes or less is what we would consider in the industry to be robust transit and frequency.
And then, final question for you. Income-wise, current ridership in our existing bus fleet, you shared some numbers with us last time. It's about, I saw about $20,000 or less. What is that percentage?
Yeah, so we do a survey annually of our customers, and we're actually working with the city manager's office to present that to council on July 19th. So you'll receive a lot more data than I'm sharing today. But yeah, we shared an infographic during the budget presentation that clearly shows the majority of our current transit customers make $20,000 or less, some $10,000 or less. If you take that kind of a step further and dig into some more of the details, you'll see that most of our customers either have one vehicle in their residence or no vehicles. But at the same time, about 32% of our respondents, our customers, are full-time employed, and over 40% of our customers indicate they use the transit service to get to work. So tying it back to, not only our current system, but BRT and the job potential along that route, we believe fits and complements our current service, but will also ideally attract new people to transit.
That's right. Thank you, Jason, for walking us back through that. I really appreciate you revisiting that. I think it's important for people to hear those numbers as the budget is in front of us today. It's a nonpartisan issue. Retiring Senator Jim Inhofe helped secure the matching funds, $14 million for this project. And then the city of OKC, its voters put the other $14 million in there in the last bond. So this is a nonpartisan issue, but it is a people issue. And beyond anything else, even though this budget does not meet what I would have done, it is really hard for me to say no to getting this bus rapid transit up and going. It is a civil rights issue in so many ways. We know that the Montgomery bus boycott, when we were segregated, we know that people stopped riding the bus for 1 year and walked to work, to recreation, to education, to let their city know that they are human beings and deserve dignity. And we know as soon as they were successful in desegregating the buses, politicians all across the South stopped funding public transportation because they did not want their tax dollars going to poor people and people of color. And that is shameful, but we can't go back and undo that. But today we can connect our people to work, and we can connect them to education. And I just want to say that that's my major reason for doing this today. One final question, City Manager. When will we see an RFP go out for this mental health alternative? This is critical to me, and I think it's a transparency issue and an accountability issue. Last year, $300,000 went into the budget for this mental health alternative, where we were going to retrain dispatchers, as you all recall, to connect people to mental health crisis counselors and not just law enforcement. In fact, I believe law enforcement is supportive of this. I'm trying to make sure our residents know when that's coming.
Yeah, so we don't have a timeline on that right now. We're just hiring the project manager. We've got 21CP on to help us with managing the project overall, and then we'll have a staff member that will be focused on that, and we'll put together an implementation plan. I would think that would be one of our early projects out. We're really close to being ready to bring an RFP forward on that kind of deals with homelessness recommendations, as well as the law enforcement task force with increasing outreach on homelessness. That also takes into account the mental health issues, so it'll have some mental health aspects to it. So that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks. 988 is going into effect at the state level. That's going to better inform us in the process. There's a pilot program going on with North Care right now called Champions that's doing mental health response, and we're working in conjunction with that. It's their program that's fully funded by a grant they have. So we're working through all of those. It'll be one of the projects that's early on as we start to work towards getting an RFP out. And actually the recommendation was to start with an RFQ or an RFI that was find out who's out there and what they might be able to provide if we're going to contract that. So that will probably be a first step, is do like an RFQ, try to get that out the door, find out what's out there and what we can use, what types of services that might combine with, and how we would structure ours. But it's definitely something that planned on the early part of the year.
The early part of this fiscal year.
The fiscal year,
So
yes.
This summer, we'll start doing that request.
Absolutely.
RFI,
yes.
Request for information, RFQ.
Yeah, we usually call them an RFQ, but we'll evaluate that and see what we want to come back to recommend to the council if we do like an RFQ, or if we just reach out to the different service providers, because we really know who they are, the ones that have participated before. So we'll see what that process is that we recommend to the council that we come forward, if it's an RFQ first and then an RFP, but we'll definitely be working on that in the early part of this fiscal year.
Okay. That's so critical, because otherwise I think what will happen is our residents will start worrying that we've, put a shiny object over here. So it's really important
Sure.
that they just heard you say that.
Sure.
So thank you for that. And then I know, this is my final thing, from council I have asked for the City of OKC's website to have an interactive timeline of all 39 recommendations that this body 8-1 accepted a few weeks ago. And I'm just curious, what is the timeline on having that up there? Because again, I think it just Whether it's a zoning case like Kelly worked earlier, or it's something like public safety, I just think that that transparency in the process is important.
So we've got a website. I mean, we've got it connected on our okc.gov website that has the recommendations that are there.
Yeah.
And we're putting, if we have anything related to the recommendations, we're putting that out there. As we get the implementation plan developed, we'll have it in a more structured format that will, here's the recommendation, here's actions that we're taking associated with that. I think on some of these, it could be you just check a box, yes, we finished that, that's done. On a lot of these, it's going to be progression. It's going to be steps towards getting them accomplished. And so we'll make sure that we have that available and have it in a structured format so you can see what recommendation the actions are associated with.
Is that an early in the fiscal year priority as well?
Yeah, I would think so. That'd be something early on we'd want to have as we get the implementation plan, that we're able to put that out as well. So it'd be one of the early projects we're working on, certainly.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure the public heard that. And I will also say, while I will be voting yes this time, if those things don't happen that we just heard, it becomes harder, because that accountability to the communities who worked so strongly for 2 years on just the public safety stuff. So that's where I'm at for now. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, City Manager, for taking time to answer those questions. Thanks, everyone, for your patience.
Okay, any other comments or questions on the budget?
Yeah, I'd like to just make some comments. I hear from this dais, I come from social services, so, talking about grants and money and funding, every time something comes before us that is, something related to social services or maybe a new way of doing something, I constantly hear a refrain. And in the social services world, you spend, hours and hours on grant reports and to present the data of where the grantor's money went and why it was effective to meet XYZ goals. And I struggle with the way that the budget gets presented to us, because especially as we talk about public safety, the data that's presented to us, at least this year, was here's how many social media followers we have, here's how many people interacted with us on social media, and not actually about any data related to the types of calls that come into our 911 dispatch system, the results from those calls, and how we can better be thinking about responding to that data and trying to address the actual community needs that underlie those calls. And especially then hearing about, oh, well, we're waiting for this project manager so we can implement these things. However, as we heard in the budget presentation, there's already a huge increase to address some of the recommendations, to pay for different technologies and things around body cameras that we've just decided to implement on our own. And so to me, that speaks to a priorities issue, that what we're prioritizing are things that have no data behind them to say that they make police officers safer, that they make the community safer, and instead things that have been shown in other communities to actually help people, to create safety, that have worked, we're kind of slow rolling and not really prioritizing. And so this year I decided I wanted to ask, well, what kind of calls do come into our dispatch system? And the ones that out of the top 10 that officers would respond to, I'll just list them because it's easier than trying to, and some of them I literally don't know the definition for. I've asked in a follow-up, but I think I just did that yesterday, so I understand that might not have come yet. But the number 1 is traffic stops, 2 is disturbances, 3 is other type, which are just things that don't fall into a standard call type, 4 is loud alarms, 5 is domestics, 6 is welfare check, 7 is suspicious activity, 8 is non-injury accident, 9 is traffic trouble, and 10 is larceny. So when I hear these narratives about how dangerous our city is and how we need more police officers on the streets to address all of these things that 911 is, dispatching, one, these categories are so broad that they don't address the specifics of, they're literally the third highest response or highest number of calls that came in 2021 is a category that is undefinable apparently. And then what we do, what some folks in our police department do, is they go in and find, okay, which ones of these were mental health calls? And so we know, after doing all of that data culling, that at least according to one definition of what a mental health call would be, that there were 21,354 mental health related calls for services. If you just pulled that out, that would rank in the top 10 as its own category. So I struggle with this sense that, well, we need to wait on the project manager to implement these things when we could be doing these things, but we're just not collectively prioritizing them. And meanwhile, council continues to get calls about homelessness and mental illness and the safety of our neighborhoods. We see increased numbers of shootings and gun violence across the community as people's economic straits become more dire, as they have interpersonal conflicts and have guns available, and so that is the tool they use to try to quell those conflicts, and then we just yell crime, we need more police, when what the data is actually telling us is, one, we need to look at the data better, and two, there's actually a lot of calls that we receive that we are sending the wrong people to respond to them. And so, you know, $300,000 for an RFP set aside a year ago that we still haven't released, you know, that I know already is going to be scrutinized to its last breath, that if anything goes wrong, quote unquote, in someone's mind, then that's a waste of taxpayer dollars. When we see over and over again that we just keep doubling down on the same solutions to community needs, and then just say, well, it's not working, I guess we need to put more into that, without much critical thought or questioning. And so I struggle when people say that I'm trying to win ideological talking points, when what I feel like I'm asking is for us to actually look at data and do the thing that is constantly asked of me in my full-time job, which is, we're giving you an investment, how, you know, what are the results from that? How is it meeting the objectives that you said you were going to do, and how are you using those dollars most effectively? But because I guess if anyone is ever critical of the institution of policing, they're trying to win ideological talking points. I guess, you know, you got me. But what I'm really trying to do and trying to say is that there are so many needs in our neighborhoods, in our communities, that there are proven methods to address. There is gun violence intervention programming, but what that takes is us to recognize that people that engage in violence are just that they are people. But our systems and our narratives dehumanize people in our communities that are not like us, to the point that just dedicating like a drop in the bucket of the funding that this city has, that are taxpayer dollars, to something new or different, that I would say actually attending a recent event, police seemed very excited for, very interested in seeing something like a gun violence intervention program happen. So I can't vote for this. I can't vote to approve this budget when we continually say we need data, when we're gonna, you know, when $300,000 for mental health intervention here, or a couple $100,000 for something like a Better Way program, that are showing results in other communities and in our own. But for some reason, we're not willing to make those systemic changes and actually look at the data that we're receiving every single day through our dispatch system to say, what are the needs, who are the best type of people to respond, what are the skills, and sending those folks to respond to those community crises. And I'll just end with an anecdotal story, since I guess data is, in some times, is not actually that important. Recently, you know, I hear a lot about homelessness and vagrancy in downtown and how it's increasing and it's exploded, and all these anecdotal stories. And so my anecdotal story is recently on a Sunday, it was very, very hot outside. I was being dropped off by a friend, and there was a gentleman laying on the sidewalk and called out for help. So I went over to him. He said he needed help getting in his wheelchair, which was broken and falling apart. He had recently been discharged from the hospital. I was ready to call IMSA because I assumed he had some kind of heat stroke, but he kept saying, no, I don't want that, I don't need it. And so I respected his wishes, got him into some shade, went and got some water and some snacks for him, so at least he had some hydration. And since it was a Sunday, there's really no one to call if it's not a health emergency. And so I had to leave him on a bench overnight, knowing that he had very swollen legs. You know, at least he got some hydration and some nutrition. But that's what, you know, when people complain about vagrancy and loitering, here's just a man who has nowhere to go. The hospital had discharged him, so he didn't want to go back there because he knew he was just going to get discharged again after they addressed whatever, you know, emergent need was there. And so the next day, I saw him again, and I called a street outreach team that is available in our community. And they came and, again, got him some breakfast, had a nurse come look at his legs, check his vitals, just make sure he was stable. And they worked with him over the last 2 weeks, and he is now in a respite care program that is paid for by the county. Not that much money to pay for these beds. And that is addressing this quote unquote vagrancy problem with an actual solution for that person. Because now that street outreach team has not just helped him get into some temporary shelter, especially when we think about the weather we just had, a gentleman like that sitting outside. You can't not get completely soaked, and now you have all these other additional health problems that might arise because of that. And instead, he is under shelter, getting some basic health care while this outreach team continues to work with him to get him into stable housing. And the team that does that, those folks make $40,000 a year. They are woefully underpaid. But they do this work because they know it changes lives and they know it's important. And that is the type of work we could be funding and investing in that actually addresses those issues, that whether it's because you care about the humanity of that person or you just don't want to see them on the sidewalk, that met both those needs. That met both those wishes from people that I hear from in the community. And it did so in a way that was incredibly cost effective, gave dignity to that person, and actually addressed the roots of the problem instead of just saying he needed to move on and get off someone's private property and shuffling him around the community. And so I guess from both the anecdotal stories and the data, I just don't see this budget meeting the needs of our community. And so I just feel like I needed to express that of why I can't support this budget.
And I'll make my comments pretty brief. One of the things that we continue to look at, especially in the past couple of budgets, is the accountability piece, which we've already heard. And my concern also is we had all of those 80 comments, and I'm curious to know where any of those responses landed as far as our city is concerned, or if we saw any of those things in this budget to reflect that we are understanding and paying attention to the concerns of what those residents and the public has had to say. And for us to have grown now to be the 20th largest city for 19 comments, that's crazy. That's very disappointing for us to only have 19 comments for a $1 billion budget. That's quite interesting. And then when we look at the areas of the comments that we did receive, I look at number 5 when it talks about services in the Spencer Green Pastures area, which I have one resident that has been asking for over 2 years just to get some help with this street. And I can't help him with one street. And that's the disturbing part of being able to look at and also address those concerns. And I know last year, I specifically asked about the Kiva program and asked for it to be put on our city side and removed from where the alliance is. And just from my update yesterday, only one, since the last, I don't know when it was funded, but only one thing has been funded in quite some time. So there is some concern about that program, especially with our city funding in giving money to that program, where we could be able to house that program as well. And all of the things that have been aforementioned, I agree with as we look at, again, the concerns of our community, the concerns of our city, and all of these concerns that we are also reading where they are landing in relation to a response. This should be a budget where, again, our community, our residents know exactly where these things are landing and understand that they have some say, not just in the general obligation bond, but also in our annual budget that we allocate dollars for. And if I'm not mistaken, I understood in past years, and I'm not sure when it stopped, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there had been some allocation for council members as far as being able to have funding for particular priority projects for their particular ward. And if that is an option for us to do to make sure we are meeting those needs, especially for some of those residents that call, that have those one-off concerns or issues that we as those council members can make sure we are addressing, it seems as if that would be something that we would want to take heed and to be a part of and have that accountability piece even for ourselves, participating in this budget, being able to do for our residents when they call us. And we have to say no sometimes, and instead of us being able to say no, we can look at what it looks like to meet that need for whoever that resident may be. So those are the concerns that I have pertaining to this budget, and we can move forward with the rest.
Any other comments or questions on the budget? If not, we can take up the resolution found at 11P2, adopting the fiscal year 2023 annual budget. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Oh, how would you like to vote, Councilman Carter? Aye? Passes 6-2. And Craig and Doug and everybody, I know how much work goes into this over the course of many months. I've been at every level of government. There's no more transparent or participatory budget process in the United States. So thank you so much. And it clearly reflects the wishes of the people of Oklahoma City. Moving on to item Q, this is a public hearing regarding an ordinance related to human rights. This is the potential recreation of the Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission. Today is just a public hearing, and we do have some people who have signed up to speak. And we have Reverend Christine Bird to begin. And I would say to everybody, the time limit is 3 minutes, and please state your name and address at the commencement of your remarks. And again, keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. And maybe because there's quite a few, I will go ahead and warn the person after so they can prepare and maybe move forward. And after Reverend Bird will be Susie Mook. All right, Reverend Bird.
Good morning. I am Reverend Christine Bird, 900 Northeast 81st, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Phone number 405-706-0361. I am in Ward 7. Councilwoman Nikki Nice is my council person. I am standing here in support of the city establishing our Human Rights Commission. I stand in support of that because as we look at and we talk about critical race theory, as we talk about replacement theory, as we see racism on the rise as far as mass shooting, I think it is important that as a city, we take the leadership and giving the knowledge and the tools and the resources for every individual to know that even though we may be different culturally, race-wise, we are one city, and the only way to understand that we are one city is to be united and to be educated about who we are and realize the strength of Oklahoma City is in our diversity. So I stand in support of the Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission.
Thank you. Okay, Susie Mook, and after Susie will be Alan Loeffler.
Good morning. My name is Susie Mock, and I am,
Sorry.
I reside elsewhere, but I use a P.O. box, so P.O. Box 14006, Oklahoma City, 73113. I am here because this is the first time I was aware of this, so I am going to do better at looking at your website and being informed. Is it correct, is it my understanding that there was a Human Rights Commission that was in our city and it was ended in 1996? And this today is the commission is going to be reestablished? Is that correct? Am I misunderstanding?
This is not really a Q&A, but those are such factual basic questions. I will answer them very quickly. Yes, it was discontinued in 1996, and the vote is not today, but that is the proposal.
And am I also able to ask, is the correct vote July 5th on this?
Well, that's what it's currently scheduled for. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
I am just wanting to ask and speak to my feeling of maybe understanding where this commission, is it changing? Will the words be the same as it was? Is it being reestablished? And is this the correct wording that will be in it? This one particular amendment that we see here before us, or were there other items that you all have already discussed? Because I looked at it was a 3-page document. Since I just went in there, I just wanted to know. I wanted to see how much we are changing the original and re-adding new.
I'm not sure I understand, but we're starting to get to a level of detail that might be better to have offline conversation, because this is not really an opportunity for Q&A.
Okay,
This
that's
is just
fine. I am very sorry. I wish I was better prepared to understand.
Sure.
But I just want to make sure that we are not establishing something that is going to hurt the rights of anyone. So if it is it equal rights? Is it a human rights for all? And I don't know if I see that, but I also want to know, is it also going to have enlargement of our budget and the establishment of more positions? Because our budget is obviously very large. That was the other reason I was here today, just to hear a little bit more about the budget. And I just am a concerned citizen that we are enlarging our city commission budgets, people to manage, compliance officers appointed. There's just, it keeps getting, it looks like bloat. So I'm very concerned about that. So I just wanted to be here today to make my concerns known and also to ask for clarification. So I obviously missed the boat on that, and I need to look a little bit further into.
We can certainly coordinate a conversation with staff to get your questions answered.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Alan Loeffler, followed by Tana Sanger.
Mayor, you almost got it right. It's Alan Loeffler. That's close enough.
Okay.
Address is 113 Northeast 3rd Street. I am speaking today because of a concern on the commission. From the information I read from the 2020 communication when this commission was proposed, it had words such as international standards of human rights. And when I think of international standards, I think of things far afield. Critical theory is certainly championed by Marxists, and there's always an oppressor and an oppressor. And if it's not economic, it's race, it's national origin. Others, the things that are in the state constitution under civil rights, I fully agree with. But when I look at websites of other cities, human rights commissions like San Francisco, I see a lot of topics that I don't see in our state constitution. So I'm concerned about that, because I think there could be unintended consequences. For example, what happens when one person's human rights conflicts with another person's perceived human rights. Is religious freedom a human right? I think we'd all say yes. If so, as in Denver, a bakery owner does not feel comfortable in making, because of conscience sake, in making a wedding cake for a homosexual ceremony, is that a violation of human rights? Will an Oklahoma City baker be sued like the Denver baker was for not making a cake? Will this proposed Human Rights Commission make proposals for the city ordinances to infringe on religious human rights? I believe the potential is there. In summary, I would just say that we have the EEOC, we have the Civil Rights Enforcement Division of the State of Oklahoma Attorney General, and the complaints can be fielded there. So I would advise the council to vote against this position.
Thank you. Okay, Tana Sanger, followed by Nicole McAfee.
Hi, my name is Tana Sanger, and I reside at 11417 Quail Creek Road. This is my first time in the chamber, and I just want to use this opportunity to tell my ward leader and the rest of you what my community is very concerned about. My community is my family, my church, and my workplace, which is very diverse. And we employ people from all races and all walks of life. We are worried about the cost of everything without increase in pay. We're worried about open borders and increased safety concerns. We're worried about increased costs of health care and diminishing quality of care, crashing stock markets and retirement funds, senior citizens worrying if their retirement's going to be enough, the federal government draining our Social Security, what our kids are learning and are not learning in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. Our schools are ranked 49th in the country. We are below, before COVID, we were 85% below grade level in all core subjects. We've lost 11,900 students since COVID. Anxiety, depression, and suicide are through the roof. I've been to 2 funerals for 2 young men in 2 months who accidentally OD'd. I've watched 2 young girls sent to drug treatment. Small businesses are asking, is the phone gonna ring? How do we recover from the shutdowns? We have a lack of competent workers. We have rising costs of overhead, and we have a huge projected jump in health insurance premiums. The Washington, D.C. types might be pushing all the HR and the DEI programs, insisting that this is what is most important to us, that this is what we're supposed to wake up every morning and worry about. Well, we are, but not in the way that you might think. All of us that go to work every day and pay our taxes watch you approve expenditures, as you suggested, that are shiny objects. And that does not feel very inclusive. When big box stores are open but our small businesses are closed, we don't think that's the diversity of services.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
When you want extra protection for yourself and elected officials, but you don't think we deserve to be protected, we don't find that equitable. So what human rights don't we already have that cause this committee to be necessary? Where's the oversight and the accountability? We are concerned this ordinance may infringe on those of us who do hold the religious doctrine of creation, and we do not support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole McAfee, who will be followed by Kathy Loggy.
My name is Nicole McAfee. My pronouns are they and she, and I live at 1712 Northland Avenue. In grad school at Oklahoma State, one of my favorite areas of study was collective memory, digging into the politics and impacts of community narratives we create around critical collective moments. Whether intentional or not, we often simplify situations and assign values and meaning to events. I think about this a lot when I consider my first clear memory of Oklahoma City. I was 5 years old. My family was here to bury my great-grandmother, Bobby. She died April 15th, 1995. The funeral was ultimately delayed by another family death, and that meant we were in town just days after the bombing of the Murrah building. I remember driving near the still fresh site of the tragedy. I remember the mood on the ground. It wasn't just my family grieving and mourning. It's a core memory of this place I call home. As an adult who first moved here, I visited the Memorial Museum, the memorial, and I became familiar with the concept of the Oklahoma Standard. This collective memory of unifying a resounding response that welcomed everyone. But what that narrative pushes aside is the immediate Islamophobia and identifying who caused the harm. It certainly doesn't make room for discussion about how just months after this act of terror, driven by white supremacist ideology, municipal leadership abolished the only municipal body doing intentional work across lines of difference and creating accountability in the direction of dignity and lived equality for everyone on the ground, the Human Rights Commission. It certainly never names the homophobia behind that. Doesn't fit so nicely with the collective memory. But it's a reality that continues to haunt our city's inability to address structural, systemic, and individual racism and bigotry to this day. And you, because of 2 years of hard work led by Black women, engaging folks from across communities in the city, you have the chance to write a new chapter in our collective memory by reestablishing our Municipal Human Rights Council. Most of my family assumed with the death of my great-grandmother Bobby, we marked the last generation to call this city home. That there wasn't safety or opportunity or a future that could sustain us here. I personally think it's a great privilege to return to this place and to intentionally work to make it the kind of city folks don't feel like they have to leave in order to have joyful, safe futures.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Human rights work helps us do that. And that's why I'm asking you to accept the recommendation of the folks who came together around this effort for 2 years and reestablish the Oklahoma City Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Logge, followed by Robert Hefner.
Hi, I'm Kathy Logge. I live at 7007 Trenton Road. In regards to the proposed ordinance relating to human rights, a commission of non-elected people acting as judge and jury is not justice. We have laws in place as the proper remedy for any and all discrimination charges. Why isn't a state jurisdiction adequate? Why create another municipal layer? What is the data on the need? What has not been handled? Does the data really support this expansion of municipal government? Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Hefner, followed by J.B. Williams.
Good morning. Robert Hefner. I'm a citizen of Ward 8, and so my councilman is Mark Stonecipher, and happy belated birthday to you. Thank you, Council, for letting me address you this morning on this topic. I'd hoped to actually address you on the budget, but for some reason we were not allowed that opportunity. But I heard some on the horseshoe here have concerns with that budget. I wish you all would have considered maybe tabling it and addressing some of the issues that were brought. I hear all the time from the community, not only to the city of Oklahoma City, but also from some of the counties, that we still have a lot of issues with boots on the ground as far as our police forces are concerned. And that is because of drug issues, human trafficking. Our city now is owned mainly, or our state, mainly by the Chinese. We're the #1 exporter of marijuana. And our police force has been decimated. I think we've lost over 100 officers. We don't attract them. Their salaries are not high enough to keep them. They can go just to the north here to Edmond and get a significant boost in their salary. And they're so demoralized by all the policies they are getting forced upon them that they feel like they can't even do the job that they've been hired to do. And so I wish you would have tabled the budget and gone back and considered some of the things that even Joe Beth brought up and James brought up. The city manager has $100 million more than our police force does. Can't we allocate some of that to them? I think that would be worthwhile considering. But as far as the Human Rights Commission, I'm not sure why this is being pushed by the City Council. I visited with the Attorney General's office. They have had no complaints from the City of Oklahoma City. They have had no meetings from this council. They are processing all the issues that are coming before them in regards to civil rights and human rights. They're not backlogged. They have adequate people handling this. So why are we pushing this? As has been said before, it sounds like we're just adding more bureaucracy. We're going to try to add salaries to this big commission. We're going to give them subpoena power. We're going to have hearings. Where are we going with this?
30 seconds remaining.
We have adequate laws that are already in place. I really don't know why you're pushing this. And I've not heard anything said on, is there an issue with the state processing something? Are there citizens who are saying they're not able to address issues that they're facing? I've not heard that from anyone, and especially Attorney General's office. So I'm not sure where the city's getting this. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. J.B. Williams, followed by Michael Washington.
My name is J.B. Williams, 2320 Northeast 26, and yes, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens who feel that way, to answer your question. The idea that we're having a conversation or discussion on whether human rights is important for people is wild. I think I was trying to understand what it meant, and it reminded me of a time where black people weren't considered even a full human. And because of that, there was even a discussion similar to this to decide if black people would be considered full human. It was called the 3/5 Compromise. And what they were trying to decide is if they deserved human rights and if they were human. And it's scary because before we even had our civil rights, we didn't have human rights. And now we're talking about human rights, which makes me feel like we're going backwards. There are people in Oklahoma City who feel as if their voices don't get heard. There are people in Oklahoma City who feel like the problems and things that they deal with are never addressed, and they have the right to have those issues and those things dealt with. And if we can put together a committee of people to help address those issues, what is the problem with that? If we can put together a committee of people to help people address their human rights and feel human in situations and places where they don't feel human, what is the problem with that? I think that oftentimes whenever people want to take away the human rights of other people, it's because they are afraid of losing their rights. And oftentimes that fear is caused by the idea of losing power. And I think that if somebody is standing next to me, they should be considered a human. Everybody in this room is a human and deserves to have the same human rights as the person sitting and standing next to them. And I think that from what I've seen on the sheet under this agenda or this item is very appropriate. And for anybody to argue that it isn't and doesn't want, all that's telling me is they don't see me and the people in my community as human. And I hope that this is something that does get passed because we are all human and we deserve to have human rights.
Thank you. Michael Washington, followed by Joe Dorman.
Greetings, this horseshoe membership. It's time for us to put this white supremacist privilege under the table. Y'all already know how I was going to do when I got up here. Ain't going to be no playing with it. We're going to get down to it or nothing at all. Now then, This Human Rights Commission was established in 1963 for a very specific purpose, and that was to alleviate friction, discrimination in job, housing, education, and so forth, and to provide unity and understanding amongst the people and citizens of the state of Oklahoma. Why was it necessary? Because blacks were considered as, continue to be considered as second-class citizens. Let's make sure I got that clear up on your minds today. Now then, the purpose of it was to investigate, to conciliate, and to settle settlements, if possible, and regarding the need for educational, equal opportunities for educational training measures as well. This is why in 1963, that the Oklahoma legislature said, hey, you know what, these Negroes are kind of need a little bit of help now. That's right, you know, Mike, I'm not gonna pull my punches and speak, I'm gonna speak my mind, whether you like it or not today. And I love the fact that this is going on. And you wanna know why a lot of people got a problem with it? Because now, if this is reestablished, it's going to be hard for you as a white supremacist, a white racist, to discriminate against black folks based on the color of their skin, not on the content of their intelligence. Now then, that's what they don't like about it, right? Now what this does is eliminates and puts a measure of respect and accountability where it must lie, right? Now then, no more housing discriminations, no more business discrimination, no more education discrimination, and no more getting away with calling Michael Washington a nigger because you don't like him. In your workplace, we can close you down now. Huh? That's what you don't want about it. You can't go around with your signs anymore. Not saying you personally, per se, but you meaning whomever it fits. In closing, it is very important that this Human Rights Commission be reestablished for the sake of unity and for this purpose to get rid of friction, number one, in stating friction. You know how friction is, you don't necessarily have to say a word, but you could be in a room with somebody, you get antsy and just want to, oh man, that person just makes me just want to flip out of it. That's what the friction is. Huh? Discrimination, oh, I'm all right, no, you can't, come on, you got to run skin color, I'm going to take you off my books.
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. My time always flies. Michael, just you really get started when okay. Providing unity, I am one among the people who love providing community for everyone. If we don't have unity in our community, we have nothing. I want everyone to say in 30 seconds or less that Michael Washington has no personal feelings against any of you. And I think by now you see that I am a people person, but I am flagrantly upset at this system. Human Rights Commission, yay, yay, yay. Let's get it.
Thank you, Joe Dorman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I want to say I greatly appreciate you taking up this item because this is something that's very important. When you look at the state of our nation, and especially where businesses are looking to come as far as a location, they look to these issues. They see this as important to make sure that their employees are treated well and that they will have good neighbors and their concerns will be heard. The fact that we would have a commission with this would allow you, those eyes and ears in the community, to go out and have those individuals working directly on a task such as this to provide those recommendations to bring back to you. You're busy with the work that you do in your wards. Commissions are established to do such a thing. I want to point to a commission at the state level, the Commission on the Status of Women, that was formed under Governor Nye, who would you view as a moderate, and has worked for years. We have staunchly conservative leaders, such as Charles McCall, appointing community leaders like Carol Hefner to serve on that commission to make recommendations on how women are treated in the state and how we can make improvements. We need to look at things like this in our community. I represent the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. I would argue the 900,000 children in this state want to have those opportunities. When you look at the breakdown and the hundreds of thousands of children that live in Oklahoma City, we need to provide those opportunities for those young men and women as they grow older to have that American dream, to have the ability to hold down a job, to have the ability to own a house, to live in a neighborhood where they feel safe, where they can raise their own children to feel safe. Human rights is important. You have heard the vast difference of opinions in this room today. That in itself shows why we need a commission to hear those individual voices, to make recommendations, to come forth to you and hopefully shape better policy and ensure those voices are heard and that the children and all individuals who would fall under this category, by ensuring that we have better human rights in place, can thrive in Oklahoma City. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity this morning.
Thank you. That concludes our residents who have signed up to speak under this public hearing. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say. James?
Yeah, thank you. I was going to save my remarks for the day of the vote, but I'm going to go ahead and give them today. I'd like to especially thank Ward 2 resident Joe Dorman for bringing our children back into this conversation. Those of you who know my former middle school work, you'll know that I taught AVID college preparation classes, achievement via individual determination. And I had to teach those kids how to strengthen their reading, writing, critical thinking, group work, and organization skills. But I had to do that at the level of the individual, right? It's a shame some people are leaving right now because I think they might find this backstory interesting, because we're going to have to work together as a city. Couple items. One, it is always important that we remember we are a country of religious pluralism. For those of you who might have forgotten that lesson, it's one of my favorites because I taught at Jefferson Middle School, and so Thomas Jefferson's always kind of the main person I got to use to tell the students the namesake that they were stepping into there and how that work would get them on the path to individual achievement. So remember, Jefferson was a deist. He did not believe in anything supernatural. This is one of our founding fathers. So if you were to do a Google search at home right now of the Jefferson Bible, you would see where he literally took a pair of scissors and he cut out any reference to anything supernatural. This is not James Cooper. This is Thomas Jefferson, founding father. He was a man of science, but he still was a deist, so he still believed in some sort of higher power. He just didn't believe that if you couldn't prove it scientifically, he didn't believe it. So he made his own Bible out of all the other words in the Christian Bible with all the moral teachings. And that's what we refer to as the Jefferson Bible. It's on my fireplace, right next to some other fun books, but a few bookshelves over is the Holy Bible. This backstory is important because it's this country's backstory, and it tells us that human rights have not always been a priority, particularly when there was a young Baptist preacher during the colonial days who they arrested, if you recall in the story, for preaching. What he was saying was that you could be born again if you accepted Christ as your Savior. This was a radical, truly radical thing to say. The Anglican Church was like, absolutely not. You are born into sin, and that is the end of story. There is no salvation. There is no grace, and grace was the key word there. There's no grace. But this young religion, this denomination of Christianity, the Baptists, said, no, there's a different approach, and they arrested him for that. So he hired a lawyer, Thomas Jefferson. And even though Thomas Jefferson did not believe a single word of what this Baptist preacher did, he defended him, and he won. And then he used that language to craft our founding words, that we are endowed by our Creator. Notice that key word, it's not God, it's Creator. We're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is the destiny of our state's children, of our city's children. And that was the values I put in them all the time. And it's a founding value. It is a founding American value. Never forget it. Jefferson was so convinced that we had to avoid what was going on in Europe at the time, where it was Protestant Christian versus Catholic Christian. And depending which type of Christian you were, depended whether or not you survived in that country. They'd come for you. You might then not be surprised to know I'm not a fan of kings and queens. Why am I not a fan of kings and queens? Because from 326 AD the time of the Council of Nicaea, the creation of the Christian Bible, all the way into the time of Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. The kings and queens of Europe kept children and their parents from reading the Holy Bible for themselves. The only person, if you recall in that story, who was allowed to read the Bible were the priests. And the Pope at the time of Martin Luther's day, Pope Innocent III, lied to the people. He told them that you had to pay for salvation. You had to pay to get your way into heaven. Martin Luther, as you recall in the story, was translating the Bible out of Latin into German, and in that book he saw no indulgences. This was a lie. But he had been taught that the Bible was the divine word of God. So he couldn't go tell everybody, but eventually he goes, no, I will tell everybody, and we will reform the church. We will protest and we will reform. Protestant Reformation. And from that, we get all the different denominations of Christianity ever since. And that's how you get to the Baptist here in America during this beginning of my story with Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson and our founders understood that we had to write this language down. It was not a given. I wish it was a given, this thing called human rights. But we have to remind ourselves of that. As you heard earlier when JB spoke, and I appreciate those comments, just because the founders wrote that language didn't mean they adhered to it. Jefferson owned slaves. And it wasn't until this, humans are complex, Michael. It's not until Andrew Jackson, you'll recall, that you're going to have a president who isn't a plantation owner and elected by the elite. Jackson opened it up to white male property owners because he had lost the previous election of a majority vote, as you recall. And he said, no, a majority of people should be the ones to put the person in power. That's your 7th president. Unfortunately, he's quite problematic too because he's responsible for the Trail of Tears, the genocide of Native Americans, pushing them off of their land to make way for slave plantations all across the South, and gives way to a state we love, Oklahoma. The 15th Amendment gives black men the right to vote, but that does not happen until the mid-1800s. And then remember, on the topic of human rights, the KKK kept those black folk from exercising their civil rights for 100 years by literally keeping them from voting. They would stand outside polling places for 100 years, all across the South. And then they elected people into office to not fund the schools that you heard Mr. Dorman talk about earlier. Until 1964 and 65, the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. In other words, it was not until 1964-65 that this country made good on its promise of our founding document that every human being in this country has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 1964, 1965. Even when white women get the right to vote in the early 1920s, it still excluded black and brown women until that 1964, 1965 moment. And that way, we are a super young democracy. But our founding words should always be our guiding principles. And that's why when I stood right there with my mother and took the oath of office, I asked to do it not on a holy Bible or the Quran or any sacred text that's religious, but on the Declaration and the Constitution, because therein lie my freedoms. Final, you heard earlier about the dissolution of the Human Rights Commission in 1996. Go find the Oklahoman article about that abolition. It was for no other reason than gay people. They were real mad, a couple council people, about gay people. They thought it went against their religion. All right, here we go. Look, I'm gonna tell my kids one more time, there's nothing sick or wrong with you when you're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, two-spirit. There was nothing wrong with any of the people that Hitler put in the gas chambers. They were human beings and he took that from them. But what is wrong is trying to create a government based on one religion. That is wrong, and it's scary. It is scary, and our founders knew that. And we have to always tell that story again and again and again and again. I do not think it's a coincidence that the Martin Luther story, when he goes and nails his 95 arguments explaining where the Pope was lying to them, Halloween. Scary. But y'all, we have to learn how to live beside one another as Christian, Jew, Muslim, non-believer. We have to. We have to, or we will fall apart. We will fall apart. So I will do my best to hold back from saying anything else at the vote, but that's what I really think is important. And as the city's first openly LGBT council person, my heart's been breaking for the last week as I finally read the Oklahoman article that talked about the abolition of this commission back in 1996. It was for no other reason than some people tried to use their Christianity to guise a hatred of gay people. There's just no other way around it. That's what they did. And I can't stress enough, even if you do hate gay people, and you should not, but if you do, you should hope that this country always protects your religious freedom and their right to exist. That is human rights. We have the right to dignity and to exist. Thank you.
All right, any other comments today from council?
Yes, I just want to make a few. And I wanted to also, in addition to what we just heard as far as the voting frenzy for voting rights, that we also had not only folks standing outside or burning people at the stake because they attempted to vote, we also had poll tax and literacy tests for folks that were simple, but they still wouldn't pass them because of these types of situations that we're facing. And I want to also foremention that we don't start these processes without doing our homework. So for the fact for it to be said that no one talked to the Attorney General's office, that's not true. We did talk to a couple of folks. We talked to the beginning conversation started with the former state Human Rights Commission and the members who were a part of that, and why we wanted to know why it had been decommissioned, if you will. We also asked what the parameters were as far as what can take place now. We talked to the Office of the Attorney General in the Civil Rights Division in EEOC. That was a conversation that was had in the preliminary of us working through this process to understand if this would be workable for us to even have in the first place, to talk through what would be the importance, the significance in other communities and other cities locally that have also established these particular human rights commissions. So I do want to give you a couple of numbers, and this is from the 2021 Human Rights Study that was held in Oklahoma City. And this was done by Sooner Poll. So if you know Sooner Poll, you know that is pretty more conservative than not as far as how they poll. And I will say from that poll from last year, 80% of respondents have experienced discrimination in the last 5 years. 4 out of 5 respondents believe harassment or discrimination is a problem in OKC. 1 in 3 respondents believe the human rights are poorly or not protected at all. A majority support human rights and civic education, as well as additional protections of human rights and liberties across race, political affiliation, etc. 43.2% of Democrats, 41.1% of Republicans, and 56.8% of independents think that harassment in Oklahoma City is somewhat of a problem. 91% of Democrats, 67.2% of Republicans, and 79.6% of independents believe students should learn about human rights. 56% of respondents say they experienced some form of discrimination in the last 5 years, but less than 5% filed a claim with the Attorney General's office. And I'm sure we can fill in the blanks on why that has not taken place. So Again, as we talk through the 2 years of us working through, as I spoke the last time for the introduction, across faiths, as far as those task force members are concerned, across political affiliations, and across culture and all the backgrounds you can think of. It was very intentional for us to make sure all of those voices were at the table for these conversations, to make sure all pieces of it were addressed. And you know, I know we're talking through a black and white issue, but this is clearly not a black and white issue when we talk about discrimination, when we talk about harassment, because of the fact on our call every single month, we had one young lady that is part of our deaf community. We wanted to make sure that there was another folks who were a part of our low vision community. We wanted to make sure every community was at the table to have this discussion, to understand what are the parameters, what are the barriers, what are the limitations, what have you seen as far as harassment and discrimination is concerned in your community? Because we know what it's like in our individual spaces, but if you don't have those same barriers, you don't know. So in order for us to be able to talk through it, it takes all of us to come to the table to have the conversations. So when we look at the diverse task force to reestablish, we formed those 4 working groups, and I want people to be very clear on what we talked about. Case studies working group, which researched HRCs in other cities, including our own state. We have some established already in Oklahoma. Also, the policy and legislation working group, which researched Oklahoma statutes and Oklahoma City ordinances to help craft the ordinance language. Status of human rights in Oklahoma City working group, which researched how human rights violations are reported and handled in our current system. And working relationships working group, which researched investigation and education of human rights related matters. So all of these things have been discussed, and we were very intentional about the conversations. And I must say, you know, there were a lot of things we didn't agree upon as members of this task force. There were votes that took place where some were outvoted. There were votes that took place where people were very emotional about their comments. There were votes that took place where we all unanimously said these are things that we agree are important or not important depending on the conversation. So again, all of these voices were at the table, and I just want to go back to 80% of respondents have experienced discrimination in the last 5 years. We have people that come up here every other Tuesday, most months, to talk about the things that they experience as far as harassment and or discrimination in our city, depending on what the case may be. It may be because they're on the sidewalk. It may be because of other things that take place as far as their ability, if they have to have a mobile assistance. They talk about those things. So these are the things that we're talking about pertaining to a Human Rights Commission. It is further than black and white. It's further than black and white. It's about us establishing and maintaining the fact that we hear all the time what one OKC is supposed to be like. Now let's make it one OKC by doing this. And I know we'll be having the vote in a month, so I will continue to speak through that and have more comments when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. And it was brought to my attention this morning, and this happens a lot in the summertime. We've got some absences coming up potentially on July 5th. And so I just kind of wanted to give notice. It may be that we have to end up deferring this to July 19th to have a good group of council here. We'll kind of continue to monitor that, and that would be addressed at that meeting, I guess, on July 5th, because that's when it is currently scheduled for. Yes. So I just wanted to kind of make sure everybody knew that was brewing.
When will we know that, Mayor?
I mean, I'd say it's probably going to happen now. I'd say it's the plan now, unless somebody's plans were going to change. So, but we can't, because it's already scheduled for July 5th. Right. Can't really deal with that until July 5th formally. It would be at the beginning of the meeting when the city manager defers things. So maybe just plan on July 19th, unless you hear different.
Well, I would ask that we have enough advance notice of that, please. So therefore, if we have folks that maybe want to speak on behalf, that they will be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, that concludes item Q, and that brings us to item 11R, which is a public hearing, 11R1, which is a public hearing regarding the dilapidated structures here listed, except for those previously struck. Has anyone signed up to speak on this, Amy?
No, they haven't.
I will ask,
Yes.
Mayor, on A and C, if I can defer those 2 weeks. Oh, are we on R? Yeah. Yeah. Yes, those two, I would ask for 2 more weeks on those, please. Thank you.
All right, so there's a request, and we'll bring this up to do it digitally, but there's a request to defer items 11R1, A, and C to our following meeting in 2 weeks. Not responding at the moment? All right, well, want to just do it verbally? Okay, we got a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, we'll take,
Take the vote verbally.
we're going
Ward
to take a
one.
vote on deferral.
Ward
Ward
1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Yes, please.
Ward 4. Ward 6.
Aye.
Ward 7.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I skipped you. Ward 5. Ward 6.
Yes.
Ward 7. Ward 8.
I got to vote.
And
too.
Mayor.
Yes. Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, then we're back on the remaining items, and there's a resolution at 11R2 declaring that those items are, those structures are dilapidated. Now, can it look like you were maybe, it was working there for a second?
Aye.
All right. Well, is there, oh, there we go.
I think that's going to
Maybe. Oh. All right, we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
Or it's up there.
Passes unanimously. All right. Item 11S1 is the public hearing regarding the unsecured structures here listed, except for those previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
They
I do
not.
have item I on this list. I would ask for 2 weeks, please.
Okay. I'd like to defer item 11S1I for 2 weeks. Motion and a second. Cast your votes for the deferral. Passes unanimously. Now we're back on the items remaining, and we have a resolution at 11S2 declaring that the structures are unsecured. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes.
My screen is locked up.
How do you wish to vote? Passes unanimously. Okay, now we're at 11T1. This is the public hearing regarding the abandoned buildings here listed, except for those previously struck. Amy, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, they haven't.
Okay.
I have an item on here, Mayor. Item B as in boy.
Uh-huh.
I can defer that, please.
Okay, 2 weeks? All right. We'd like to take up a motion now to defer item 11T1B for 2 weeks. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, 11T2 then is the resolution declaring that the buildings are abandoned, those that are still remaining that were not struck or deferred. Got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. All right, item U, this is a public hearing regarding fire sales tax appropriations and a resolution to be introduced today. What we'll return to the public hearing after maybe we hear a short
Yes.
presentation.
So Doug Dowler, our budget director, will give a quick presentation on U, and then when we get to the item, he'll do the same thing on V. These are police and fire sales tax funds. These resolutions are required. They align with the budget, with what we've already adopted within the budget, but it's resolutions that are required to be in compliance with journal entry of judgment from many years back. And so I'll let Doug just walk us through
Right,
this.
just briefly, as the city manager said, these resolutions govern how we can spend the fire and police sales tax in the coming fiscal year. The dollar amounts that are here before you match up with what was in the budget, and these identify the specific positions that would be funded, both uniform and civilian, as well as specific projects that would be funded through the sales tax. As we finish up this current year, we'll be compiling the expenses that we had in the current year to make sure they aligned with the resolutions that were adopted last year. Our city auditor's office reviews those to ensure that everything is in compliance with the resolution. And likewise, our municipal counselor's office reviews all of these projects to make sure that they are in compliance with the ballot language that established both the police and fire sales tax. So these are just kind of some extra layers of reporting to ensure that everything is in compliance with what was adopted by the ballot language there. So, and again, this is for fire and then for police for their full sales tax budgets for next year.
Okay, has anyone signed up to speak under the public hearing, Amy?
No, they haven't.
They have not. So we will close it, and we can now take up 11U2, which is the resolution to be introduced, I should say. This would be set for final hearing on June 21st. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. And then 11V, you kind of covered this, Doug, already? Okay, so Amy, has anyone signed up to speak under the public hearing?
No, they haven't.
All right, so 11V2 is a resolution to be introduced and set for final hearing regarding appropriations for the police department for fiscal year 2022-2023, as Doug just explained. We can take up a motion to introduce the resolution. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 7-1. Okay, W1 is a resolution approving the request for salary continuation for Major Antonio Carbajal. Executive session is not requested. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. X1 is a joint resolution with the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority authorizing the firm Collins, Zorn, and Wagner, PC to represent city employees Jared Tipton, Ashley Copeland, and Jennifer Titus in the case of Scott v. City of OKC. Executive session is not requested by staff. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes 5-3. Okay, item Y is enter into executive session to discuss collective bargaining negotiations with the FOP, IAFF, and AFSCME. And I might suggest at the late hour that we go ahead and do this because I don't want to lose people. I mean, this is important, and we have a not insignificant number of residents signed up to speak, plus council comments. So I know it's our standard practice usually, but I always think if we're running late that we probably ought to go ahead and do it. So if there's no great objection, my suggestion is we take the vote to do executive session and we go ahead and do it. So we get it done before noon. All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We will now retire to executive session and we will return. Okay, we are back. We are now on item 11Z1, claims recommended for approval. Executive session is not requested. We have items A through E we can take with one motion. All right, motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Okay, we are now at item 12, comments from council. It is, by the way, happy belated birthday to Mark, happy birthday to Todd, who has stepped out. And lest we forget, I do want to mention this is Amanda's last council meeting, and she's going to enter a new exciting private sector chapter. I'm sure we'll still see her around, but you know, Amanda, you've just been an incredible asset to the city and to the people of Oklahoma City and to this council, and we will miss you dearly. So thank you for your service.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with each one of you. I truly appreciate all of your wonderful support, and it's been development of friendships and working relationships, and I could not have asked for a better council to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go around the horseshoe. Ward 1?
None for me today, sir.
Ward 2?
Well, on that unexpected note, I'll just start with Amanda. There are two items I will always cherish. I still can't believe that one of them actually happened. And it was in the 2020 budget when Councilors Nice and Hammond and I wanted to do budget amendments. And you intervened and you're like, let me walk you all through this process. And we wrote that resolution together that ultimately is giving way to a mental health alternative and violence interruption program and additional mental health services for the officers. Well, you know, because you helped write it. And it is a shock of my life that we wrote that resolution, that we passed that resolution unanimously. And I really credit your patience walking with the chief and me and the city manager's office with Joe Beth. I remember the night before being on the phone with Joe Beth talking about our homelessness concerns and getting that language right. And you walked us through that. And so just thank you. And then the other one, that open records moment, you really walked me through that in a way that I will always just be grateful for your empathy and your legal knowledge, so thank you. And Godspeed to you. And you're always welcome in Ward 2. Speaking of Ward 2, I just want to thank everybody who helped make the Paseo Arts Festival such a success this year. Unfortunately, I was out of town, so I didn't get to attend, but fortunately it was to see my 20-year-long best friends, their band Chat Pile. They were on a tour through the Midwest, and I met up with them in Kansas City, Missouri. And y'all, they represented Oklahoma City so well up there. It was incredible to hear. So they went to Madison, St. Louis, Minneapolis, and then I met with them in Kansas City, Missouri. And it is so incredible to hear people who've never been to Oklahoma City, it was a full room, singing lyrics by one of our local people, a Ward 2 resident. It is an incredible feeling to hear people sing lyrics aloud from one of our people. And it's an even cooler feeling to hear people talk about how, OKC, y'all are so cool, and I can't wait to get down there and see y'all perform there. Like, that's what you heard in that room, and this was a metal band. And Chat Pile made their way into the music site Pitchfork. And that's a pretty noted site, and it actually reviewed their album quite well. So unfortunately, I missed the Paseo Arts Festival because I had to go support my ride or dies, but it was an honor to do that with them. I want to thank the youth at Sisu Youth for their presence at the Pride Parade on 39th Street this last week. It was so cool and such an honor to walk with them. Actually, I was on a bike, but they were just telling me about their experiences with homelessness and how grateful they are for what SISU is doing in terms of services. And then they were eager to offer suggestions to this council and to SISU about how they could improve those services. That they're very grateful for them, and I'm just grateful to know that SISU exists in our city. So that's that. And then finally, a special thank you to our birthday councilman, Todd Stone, for hanging out with me in Ward 2 last week. I got to take him on a tour, and we just drove around our neighborhoods and just talked. I think the windows were down for part of that, because it was good weather. And then we went to the Wedge and sat and chat. And when I put on my Instagram story the photo of us, it's one of the most viewed that was there, and people were pretty happy to see that you actually cared enough to come see us over there. I don't want to say I was shocked by that response, but I think they were just happy to see like us moving around each other's wards. So that was really cool, and I really appreciate your time that day. The Wedge even shared the photo again. I took a photo while we were getting gas. I took a photo of the Wedge with the Western Avenue District. And something as simple as that was something that was exciting to them to see there. So thank you.
That's it. It's my birthday gift to all of you.
Yes, I just want to thank Kat and all of the employees who marched in the Pride Parade on Sunday with the Oklahoma City Employees Association, and for inviting us to join them. It was really neat to just have a real city presence and see all of staff from all sorts of different departments just celebrating. And so I really appreciate the invitation and enjoyed getting to have a chance to walk in the parade.
Yes, I couldn't find the city because I was trying to walk with the city. I couldn't find them, so I walked with somebody else, so it was all good. But I would say that the birthday boy made you famous on Instagram, I see. That's pretty fun. And thank you so much for your service, Amanda, and all that you have done for us. You will truly be missed as far as your service to assist us in the things that we need. So I greatly appreciate your work. I want to shout out the Paseo Arts Festival because I actually went on that Sunday and had a blast. It was scorching hot though, but it was a good day. And I like that festival, and, you know, not to be biased, but I like that one because it is so diverse and artsy. You really get a diverse as far as the vendors from, you know, small increments of what you can purchase compared to higher end art. You really get a variety of those things where you actually feel like you can afford to buy something there compared to some of our other arts festivals. But the food is always good at any arts festival, I will say. So you always can get something, if not anything. But I do want to also, I want to send a special thank you to the Oklahoma City Zoo. They had a Starlight Gala on Friday, and it was a safari themed, and it was their inaugural Starlight Gala, and they raised over $200,000. And it was just a great experience to be outside and to see all of the efforts that are happening and honor some good people that are doing some good work in order to move the Oklahoma City Zoo and Botanical Gardens forward to make sure that it is a staple for our city and also for our state when they come to the Adventure District. I also want to commend the Northeast Alumni Association. On last evening, they gave away 3 scholarships to some young people in our community. And one of those young people in particular was a student who ended up graduating as the valedictorian of his class. And he was a part of Northeast as they merged into the class at Northeast, and basically was kind of told that he probably wouldn't be one of the top students, and he excelled and became the valedictorian. And now he's going to Rice University. And so again, want to commend them for the Henderson Todd Scholarship, that they have named it after Ms. Joyce Henderson, who also had a street naming in her honor within the last couple weeks at Classen, and she was also part of the sit-inners with Clara Looper and those young people, and Dr. Melvin Todd, who was the first principal of color that they had at Northeast High School. So that's the significance of why it's named such. Juneteenth luncheon is going to be next Thursday, so we definitely hope everyone will purchase tickets. The proceeds will go to the Willa D. Johnson Endowment Fund for our young people in the recreation center that we are opening next year, that we are so excited about. And I do want to also, I talked about Pride, so happy Pride to all of our folks this month. And also, it is African American Music Month. So if you love music as much as I do, this is one of my favorite months of the year to commemorate music within our city and within our states and our country. Also want to thank all of the people that came out for the Peace Walk we had on Sunday. We started at Martin Luther King Elementary School and walked to Ebenezer Baptist Church. And, you know, I personally thought it was going to be a long walk, but it actually wasn't that far. So we stopped at a couple places, and I got to meet a couple of constituents that I hadn't met before and walk with them and talk about just things that are happening in the community. And that's what it was all about, just being able to have diverse conversations, being able to say hello to people, and also for people to experience communities that they have never been before. So to have that intimate walk on the streets, you know, down Prospect and coming up 36th Street, it was really historic and meant a lot for the people that were there, and especially for me to see all of the people that are interested in what's happening in our communities and wanting to be a solution to what's happening in our communities. I'm very excited for the Slaughter Mansion. They are getting their historic designation signed this Saturday, so there's going to be a ceremony, and I don't know if I was really supposed to say that, but you'll be able to see the sign after the fact. I don't know if it's like an open ceremony or not, but I'm just excited about it when you think about Dr. Slaughter and the things that he had done in his tenure, way ahead of his time. And if you have not researched Dr. Slaughter, I would encourage you to do such. He had his own airline as far as for being able to have airplanes come in and out. And he is the reason we had a couple of other physicians come to Oklahoma City and practice here for our city, for our African American community. Dead Center Film Festival is underway, so please make sure you take heed and be a part of that. We had Rosetta Funch's Day on this past Saturday, so I'm very thankful that we were able to commend her with a citation of her service to our city and for her art and the things that she's done. And if anyone has been in my office, I have a piece of her art there. So if you would love to see it, please come in and look at it at any time. And speaking of art, we have Douglas Dugout. We have murals that are coming. I'm so excited about these murals that are coming to our community on the outside for us to honor and commemorate what's happening around our community as well. Two more things I wanted to commend. I had talked about one of my graduates, the last council meeting as far as our youth council members, and I went to the graduation for my other council member this past Saturday at Cassidy School. Miss Ruthie Presswood graduated, and she received an alumni award for just the great things she's doing at school. And Stephen Adams was there. That was the strangest thing, but it was fun to see him at the graduation. And lastly, I just wanted to make my comments about Ms. Johnson, the passing of Willa D. Johnson and her history. And when you think about her living history, that is no more. Those are really the things I think that come to mind more so than anything, the fact that I was able to experience that living history while she was here. Because a lot of times we don't have that reference in these spaces, depending on what space that person may have held before you. But to be in her presence was clearly a joyful experience. And of course, she was affectionate as far as calling everybody honey, sweetie, or Precious, depending on if she knew your name or not. That's what she called you. So I'm just thankful for the work that she has done and had done for our community and for our ward, and for taking a chance and not saying no for running for office in order to break the glass ceiling for another woman to be a part of this space and to hold space as well for our city and for our ward. So she will truly be missed, and I'm very thankful that we were able to do the great work that we did in 2019 when she was here to see and accept us naming unanimously the new recreation center in Northeast Oklahoma City after her. So I know she was very excited about that and very involved when it came to us starting the endowment and with the art. I took it over there as soon as it was voted. I took it to her house so she could see the booklet and see what was coming and understand that. And so she was very excited about those things. And I just regret that she wasn't here for us to open it with her, but she did move the dirt for it. So I guess that's the most important piece, that she knew that it was coming, and she passed by it at least a couple times before I know she had passed away. So just grateful for her work, and definitely continue to keep her family in our thoughts and prayers during this time and in the future, in our city and our county as well, because of her great service. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Craig wanted to say something
Yeah,
about Amanda as well.
I just wanted to say publicly, Amanda knows how much I appreciate getting to work with her and what a blessing she's been to me and to the organization. But wanted to be able to say that publicly. I appreciate all the work that our municipal counselor's office does. All of the attorneys work very hard to represent the city and do great work behind the scenes, and I really do appreciate that. But Amanda's really just stood out in her relationship she's developed with all the team, and the opportunity I've had to work with her for the past 15 years has been great. I'm going to miss working with her in this capacity, and I know you all will too, but I think it's going to be good that we still get to work with her as she's working in private practice, and I have a lot of things related with the city. And so thank you, Amanda, for your work. Really appreciate that.
Indeed. Okay, we're now at item 13, citizens to be heard. I want to acknowledge some who signed up but clearly are not here anymore. Rick Horner, Robert Hefner, and Michael Washington. But still here is Reverend Paulette Legg.
Good morning, afternoon. The whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to do so. That's a direct quote from Richard Nixon, President of the United States of America, 1962 through 68. I heard the word democracy as soon as I found my seat and sat down, and my mind raced back to a point in time when I looked at that word and studied it. And while doing so, the word demagogue cropped up in my mind. And I said, well, Lord, what does demagogue have to do with democracy? And he led me to a definition. Demagogue, a person, especially a political leader, who wins support by exciting the emotions of ordinary people, rather than by having good or morally right ideas and intentions. And then my mind raced because that was a week prior to Uvalde. And I've been troubled sometime by all the murders of people who look like me, especially young people who look like me. murdered at the hands of those persons of law enforcement that we should be able to look to for leadance, guidance, and protection. So I conversed with the Spirit, and I said to him, "What are you saying to me with all of this?" And he said, "Violence begets violence. Sin begets sin. Untrustworthiness begets untrustworthiness.
30 seconds remaining.
And fear begets fear." I submit to you that we're living in a dangerous time in our society. Everybody's fearful. The police are fearful and trigger happy with badges. The people that they are supposed to protect are fearful of them and their times. We are living in a critical day. The Lord is trying to get someone's attention who are in political positions to change this before it's ultimately too late. He who has ears to hear, let him hear.
All right, thank you. That concludes our business for the day. We are at item 14, adjournment, and we are adjourned.